£1,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For a chance to win a motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 9th of April. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now, China vows resolute and effective measures as Trump's 104% tariffs take effect. It all comes as apparent cracks appear within presidential circles, with Elon Musk branding a key trade advisor, key trade advisor, a moron, dumber than a sack of bricks, and something even ruder still. We'll have the very latest.
Doesn't hold back, does he? Elsewhere, Universal Studios, yes, they are to open their first theme park in Britain. Woohoo! The attraction will be one of the largest and most advanced theme parks in the whole of Europe. An estimated £50 billion boost for the economy when it opens in 2031.
And the King and Queen celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary as they continue their historic state visit to Italy. Well, King Charles is set to address a joint session of Parliament later this afternoon. We'll bring you that live.
And GB News can exclusively reveal the number of people jailed for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham has now exceeded the number of grooming gang abusers jailed in the South Yorkshire town. It comes as Labour drops plans for grooming gang inquiries on the final day before the Easter recess. I couldn't believe the news yesterday evening, was it, when Charlie Peters brought it to light for GB News that Labour have just snuck in on the last day of term a little change to their policy. Just 3 months after they said we're going to have these local inquiries instead of a national inquiry, just going to scrap those plans. Nah, we're just going to have a little flexi fund where local authorities can choose if they want to take part.
Because we know that local authorities are ever so keen to investigate themselves and their own actions. And we can really rely on those local authorities to check behind their own ears. But there was an excoriating exchange in Parliament yesterday between the Home Office team and the Shadow Minister, Katie Lamb, who highlighted the reticence of some of these councils to actually instigate these investigations. The fact that the man the Labour government appointed to lead this stuff hasn't heard anything about whether or not these investigations have started, these inquiries have started. And she spoke about some of the most powerful testimony that we've heard in the court transcripts of some of these convictions.
But it's crazy, isn't it? Because one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest charges against local authorities is that they covered up, they didn't hold people accountable, and now they're not going to be held accountable unless they choose to mark their own homework. It's total madness. I do see it as a betrayal of the thousands of victims.
And, of course, it does seem that this issue has dropped out of the news agenda on other channels. There was a time at the start of this year when everyone was talking about this. Yep. Well, we are not giving it up. We are going to keep the government's feet to the fire on this. So do stay with us throughout the programme here. That and so much more to come after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. These are your headlines. China has accused the White House of bullying practices after Donald Trump imposed a 104% duty on Chinese goods into the US. The US president escalated his trade war with the world's biggest exporter after Beijing responded with tariffs of their own. Elsewhere, Elon Musk has branded Donald Trump's trade czar dumber than a sack of bricks, suggesting there could be a growing split in the White House over the tariffs. The Tesla founder said Peter Navarro was truly a moron after claiming the world's richest man was merely a car assembler rather than a manufacturer. Meanwhile, the Chancellor has rejected calls to launch a Buy British campaign in response to the tariffs, dubbing it too inward-looking. A Paddington Bear statue destroyed by vandals in the early hours of March has been unveiled at a ceremony in Newbury.
3, 2, 1.
The newly installed statue was damaged on March the 2nd when two Royal Air Force engineers broke it after a night out and made off with parts of it. GB News can reveal that more people have now been jailed in Rotherham for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers than the number of grooming gang abusers jailed. Since last August, South Yorkshire Police have made over 100 arrests in connection with the disorder at the asylum hotel, of which 77 have now been jailed. This compares to only 68 convictions to date for group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation in the town. This comes as Labour announced they've dropped plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on grooming gangs. Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Kevin Hollinrake, told GB News it's allowing a cover-up to continue.
Well, I was appalled to hear that yesterday. I was in the chamber for that statement. And, you know, I mean, this means that the cover-up can continue. We know there was that some of the people within the local authorities concerned were complicit. We want a national inquiry, an independent national inquiry, which can set its own terms of reference, which can call witnesses, call for evidence, and make sure anybody who should be held to account is held to account for what's happened, because what's happened is an utter disgrace.
But Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport Lisa Nandy says an inquiry is not needed.
We're absolutely determined to make sure that we give local areas the tools that they need to tackle the problems in their communities, and we will hold them to account for it. Of course we will, and the Minister, Jess Phillips, is absolutely determined to do so. But what we won't do is pretend that just announcing inquiries is the way to solve this problem. In some cases we need inquiries, in other cases we don't. We need other measures, and that's what we're working with communities to do.
In other news, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been speaking in Bedfordshire about a new deal securing the first universal theme park in Europe, set to open in 2031.
What a momentous day, what such an important day. And it's going to put Bedford on the map for millions of people, film lovers, people coming here for fun, people building their careers here. It'll create thousands of jobs for the local community.
The project is estimated to generate about £50 billion for the economy, generating around 28,000 jobs for the UK. Now, the Taliban say the case of a British couple in their 70s held in Afghanistan will be decided under Islamic law. It's the first time in more than a month that Taliban authorities have publicly commented on the case of 79-year-old Peter Reynolds and his 75-year-old wife Barbie, who were arrested in early February after being taken from their home. The couple have been running training projects in Afghanistan for 18 years. It is thought they were detained because of a course they ran for women teaching mothering skills. The Taliban have banned all education for girls beyond primary school. A spokesperson said, God willing, their problem will be soon resolved. And the King has met with Giorgia Meloni at her residence on the outskirts of Rome. His Majesty spent the morning of his 20th wedding anniversary with the Italian Prime Minister at Villa Doria Pamphili, being welcomed on a red carpet and invited to inspect the guards drawn from the armed cavalry. Charles and Camilla will mark 2 decades this evening as guests of honour at a state banquet in Rome. Yesterday, their trip was overshadowed by Prince Harry battling in a London courtroom to challenge the decision to downgrade his UK taxpayer-funded security. The Duke arrived at the High Court this morning for the second day of the 2-day hearing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past midday. Now, the government has announced they're dropping plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on said grooming gangs.
What exactly does that mean? Well, the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillips, she said this in the Commons yesterday.
We'll set out the process through which local authorities can access the £5 million national fund to support locally led work on grooming gangs. Following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work.
This is more than a watering down. This is more than a watering. Let's bring in Charlie Peters, who's been covering this for us, of course, our national reporter. Charlie, this looks on the face of it a betrayal.
Well, it's a significant shift from what they said in January. On the 16th of that month, when the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said that there would be 5 locally led inquiries on the model of the Telford inquiry, and that Tom Crowther-Casey, a barrister who chaired that inquiry in the West Midlands, would develop a framework for other inquiries to happen throughout the country, for others that need it, for those 4 other areas that they would select. But for those of us who've been doing stories on the grooming gangs, and GB News has been leading on this for the last 3 months since that announcement, there has been a change in the wording of the statement that the Home Office gives us on the back of those stories. In January and in early February, they were talking about 5 local inquiries. But 2 weeks ago, you remember, we did a great report from Oldham, speaking to a survivor who hadn't spoken out for the first time ever. And that statement said further inquiries. They got rid of the word 5. We noticed that and we thought, OK, something's changed here. And then last week, Tom Crowther gave evidence at the Home Affairs Select Committee, and he said that he was not involved anymore in developing that framework. Instead, ministers were making it. So that independent oversight had been removed. And now yesterday, Jess Phillips says, instead of it being locally led inquiries, it'll be locally led work. It could still include inquiries, but this is coming back from feedback, she said, from authorities. We presume that authorities have been asked to do these inquiries and they've not agreed to it. What sort of feedback have they had and who have they asked? These are the key questions I've got today.
But frankly, why on earth would the feedback from the councils, many of which are the ones that need to be investigated, it's like saying, well, we've got this person on trial. and we've asked for their opinion as to whether or not the trial should go ahead. And they really would rather it wouldn't, so we're not going to do the trial.
That's been the criticism put forward by the Conservatives and Reform UK. They're calling for a national statutory public inquiry. They say that this will allow people to compel evidence and compel witnesses, force people in front of a judge and some cross-examination. These locally led inquiries, by contrast, rely on people volunteering information. In Telford, for example, Mr Crowther has told journalists that what he had there was sort of tea and biscuits. People could come in and share their experiences. Now, that model certainly leads to some truth. More information comes forward. But critics that I've spoken to over the years, survivors, campaigners, their families, they say it doesn't necessarily get you justice. People aren't held to account. People aren't prosecuted. They don't lead to trials. They don't lead to people being sacked. People can just leave these authorities or these police forces and get better or different work elsewhere. They may retire with their pensions.
And how much has this got to do with politics, do you reckon, and concerns over demographics in certain Labour constituencies? Because it does seem rather bizarre that they would decide to backtrack on something that is so important to so many people out there.
Jess Phillips is clinging on to a very slim majority in Birmingham Yardley on the back of a challenge from an independent candidate. It's certainly the case that Labour is nervous about that political force in general. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform, he's certainly made that accusation that they're backtracking on this, in his words, due to that crisis. But there's also wider
Basically concerned about Pakistani Muslim votes.
Precisely, they're concerned about the demographic shift in these areas, and this could further affect their support from British Muslims. But Robert Jenrick, speaking to me yesterday, the Shadow Justice Secretary, we've been able to reveal today that the number of convictions for people over these grooming gangs in Rotherham has been overtaken by the number of convictions for that riot last August outside a Holiday Inn Express hotel over the asylum seekers there. Now, Mr Jenrick said this is an example of Keir Starmer, who he described as two-tier Keir, being squeamish about dealing with this issue, echoing, in a sense, Mr Farage's criticism as well, saying that the state does not want to deal with this problem because it makes them nervous about the racial elements involved. That's what Baroness Louise Casey is investigating as part of her 3-month audit. We're expecting to hear back from that soon. I had to just mention now also that the Safeguarding Minister yesterday also made a wider announcement about other measures. She's going to bring in a Child Protection Authority. That's one of the ICSA recommendations. She's also said that doubling funding from the Home Office to adult survivors of child sexual exploitation. And part of that locally led work will include more therapeutic care and also victims panels. But as you both said, Emily and Tom, this is a step down, quite significantly, I think, from what they promised in January. 5 locally led inquiries. Now, the only one we know will happen was Oldham, and that was agreed before the furore erupted in January.
I think the timing of the announcement makes that clear. I understand you've had a right of reply.
Yes, indeed. I think hopefully it's on the screen for you to read.
Oh, well, fantastic. Here we go. Yes, this is from Labour. Shameless Robert Jenrick did nothing about heinous grooming gangs while he had the power as a minister to help the victims of this appalling abuse. The Tories did not hold a single meeting with victims, police forces, external organisations, experts or councils, nor did they lift a finger to implement any of the recommendations of 7-year-long national inquiry into child sexual abuse. Instead, Jenrick and his colleagues swept it under the carpet after it was published. This is another utterly disgraceful, dishonest and hypocritical attempt to make political capital out of an issue he could not have cared less about when he was actually in government.
Now, Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, has also had this to say. It is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children from the horrors of child sexual abuse and exploitation. Today, we've set out the next steps in our work to address the issues raised in Alexis Jay's independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. This will put victims at the heart of the government's work to combat child sexual abuse by creating a Child Protection Authority, providing national leadership and learning on child protection and safeguarding.
OK, so there you go. Thank you, Charlie. We're now joined by the online grooming expert and former Met investigator, John Taylor. John, I assume you've worked with victims of grooming gangs and groomers in general. How do you expect they feel knowing that the government has chosen to water down what already was a pretty watered-down offer when it came to local inquiries?
Well, yet again, the victims here will feel completely let down and very, very frustrated. It's one of these things, if you go back over the 25, 30 years and longer that these things have been going on, at what stage will a government, it has to be, say, government rather than a party, will one government actually stand up and say, right, let's be honest, let's actually into all this. Let's look into why there's been 45, 50 cities, over hundreds of victims of this type of child sexual exploitation, basically abduction and rape, gang rape of young girls. When are they going to stand up and say there has to be a public inquiry into this? Because there have been individuals, there have been people in authority, and that includes the police, social services, government, CPS, and local authorities, who've let the victims down because what have they done? They've ignored it. They've actually said it hasn't happened. Well, guess what? It has.
Now, the government continually points to the Alexis J report, which looked at all areas of child sexual exploitation, from the Church of England to the Jimmy Savile affair and everything in between. What it didn't really focus on was this specific model that some have alleged is racially motivated. Pakistani Muslim gangs targeting in particular white girls, young white children who they see as perhaps less pure or more out to get it, and target people based on their race. That's something that hasn't been explicitly explored.
You're right, Tom. And the issue, the funny thing about this is that you know it, I know it, Emily, you know. We all know who the victims, how they're going to be targeted. We know where they were going to be targeted, and we know by whom. We know that now. And yet still the people in authority won't do it. The Alexis J 20 recommendations, you know, I've got them written down here. They're in my brain. I think, well, they've already been in place. I spent 20 years in child protection doing all the investigations. We had the training, we had the individuals. But as you're quite right, when it came down to specific, which is talking about, as we call it, grooming gangs, there's been no mention of this. When you're a detective, what you look at is things like the offender methodology, you know, the MO, who, you know, what are they doing? How are they doing? How are they picking their victims? Who are the vulnerable victims? Why are they vulnerable? Right, we can prevent it there. And then you want to investigate. So you say, well, who's actually committed the crime? That can be intelligence-led, but it also comes from victims reporting it. Well, these victims weren't believed. And why weren't they believed? Well, that's a lot to do with power and the people they were speaking. That includes the police, social services, local authorities, who wanted to turn the blind eye, have a cover-up. Why? Because in some ways they might be implicated themselves because of that cover-up. Then we've moved on. Social media's come into it, so now people are worried about being cancelled, having that race card pulled against them, and actually finding themselves in the position, well, you're not going to be working here. And as Charlie, I think Charlie was quite right in what he put there. He said they're so worried about losing their jobs. Well, victims and people, even the public, want to see, well, if you're responsible for this, if you're responsible for that cover-up, we want you punished. We want you to actually suffer in some way.
Absolutely. And it's so frustrating, because I can imagine Labour ministers are very willing to call a spade when it comes to abuse in the church, whether it's the Church of England or the Catholic Church. But when it comes to this, because of potential racial tensions, they're too afraid, in my view. And it's hardly surprising. It's coming from the top. Keir Starmer said that politicians calling this out and calling for a national inquiry were jumping on a far-right bandwagon. That doesn't help open conversation. It makes it near impossible to have that open conversation unless you're on a free speech channel like this.
No, I agree. You know, if you look at the operations and all the individuals that have now gone into prison in some way or have been charged and prosecuted, the vast majority are coming from British Pakistani heritage. So therefore, but you have also got some men who are white, but the vast majority. And if you want to police something effectively and correctly, you've got to understand who's doing it.
Otherwise, you've got to understand the problem. John, we're going to have to leave it there, but really appreciate your input. John Taylor, online grooming expert and former Met investigator. Well, please do get your thoughts in. I think it's pretty shocking, actually, that they've done this, but perhaps you have different views.
Well, now we've got some breaking news to bring you.
Yes, the Chinese Finance Ministry has announced they are set to impose additional tariffs of 84% on US goods.
Well, the announcement has led to sharp drops in the global markets. China's 84% tariffs are up from the previously announced 34%. It's a huge rise. This is all according to the Chinese Finance Ministry. China has also raised concerns with the World Trade Organization, accusing the United States of destabilizing global trade.
Yes, it does look like the war between China and the United States is the biggest at the moment. We're joined by the host of the Politics podcast, Justin Young. Justin, thank you very much indeed. This is heating up, isn't it? Particularly between the United States and China.
Yeah, safe to say that is definitely something that is happening right now. And obviously this is a retaliation for Donald Trump essentially raising tariffs on Chinese goods up to 104% in total. The reality here is very, very complicated. Number one, goods coming into China from the United States is much less than the goods that come in from from the U.S. to China are less than what the Chinese manufacturing sends into the United States. It's about a $200 billion trade gap. So this will hurt China more than it will hurt the United States, at least in terms of the flow of goods. Where it is very much going to hurt the United States is in how much China owns bonds and they own treasury bills. So that is something that we are looking at right now in the U.S. as those markets begin to dip. But obviously, we are in the thick of things.
And the thick of things is an apt description, given the 104% tariffs that the United States has charged on Chinese imports. That is going to more than double the price of anything imported from China. Many of these things are components that are then used in further down the assembly line. So you can see how these sort of taxes can compound upon each other. And we're starting to see some dissent within the Trump inner circle over this. We've seen a massive and very peculiar war of words emerge between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro. Now, Peter Navarro is the chief trade advisor, really, to Donald Trump. But Elon Musk, we know, is sort of in such a senior position in and around the White House. I mean, this is an extraordinary battle.
So this is an ideological battle that really shows you where the American right is in terms of an ideological shift. Peter Navarro was somebody that was a Democrat for the vast majority of his career, and he was somebody that had progressive values when it came to protectionism of industry. Elon Musk is not that. He comes from far more of the libertarian wing of the Republican Party, and they found common cause when it came to Donald Trump when he was running. But now that the rubber has very much met the road, you have Peter Navarro, who is very steadfast and has been forever about tariffs, and Elon Musk, who not only philosophically does not agree with it, but very much monetarily does not agree with it either, as he is somebody that is dependent on China for Tesla and many other things.
But we've seen in the White House press briefing room the administration's bizarre response to this open warfare. What did the press secretary say?
She said, boys will be boys, and they were going to allow the public squabbling to continue. Now, that might across the pond seem odd, but that is very much on brand for the Trump administration, for those of us who have watched it day in and day out. Donald Trump is not squeamish when it comes to conflict amongst his staff, and it is interesting that at times we revere that in America, and sometimes we call it the team of rivals, as Doris Kearns Goodwin called it, and it was labeled to Obama's administration. And this is a little bit different. I don't remember anybody in Obama's administration using the kind of slurs that I'm not even allowed to say on this very genteel network that Elon Musk has called Peter Navarro. But it is certainly something that they do not shy away from, the Trump administration.
Yes, definitely a war of words there. Justin, I wonder if you've seen this video campaign that's coming out of China mocking US citizens. Let's have a little watch.
So this is the video posted to TikTok. We don't know precisely the origin, but did come from a Chinese account, showing what purports to be American citizens,
obese ones,
working in what can only be described as sweatshops, making clothing, including bras, trainers, iPhones as well. Is this China sort of mocking America, perhaps on the on the regression path that it might be on if it becomes the sort of economy that China used to be 10 or 20 years ago?
You know, this has really been a failure of the Trump administration to give any kind of singular vision to this, because you have some folks that are out there from the Trump administration, like Doug Burgum, talking about how reshoring American manufacturing is a future forward idea, that with AI and robotics, these kinds of factories are not going to look like the factories of the 1950s, and certainly not like the factories in some of those towns in China currently. Rather, it's going to be a big, gleaming, beautiful future. And then you have somebody like Howard Lutnick, who is out here arguing, no, don't worry, your kids will be able to screw tiny screws into iPhones, which is not something that I think a lot of Americans are really excited about. So that is certainly a ripe parody, an AI video of a bunch of people from the middle of America sewing their own gloves together. But you know, it is a curious moment, because right now we still don't know, is this a negotiating tool or is this a reality? And if it's a negotiating tool, then I think you have a lot of people that are nervous about it, that understand it, that Donald Trump's going to unplug the world economy and then dare everybody to have him plug it back in and see what he can get for it. If it's the new reality, then there's a lot more strident questions that are going to come out, and probably even nastier words than Elon Musk has called Peter Navarro.
Perhaps. Justin Young, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. You're the host of the Politics podcast and an American political commentator, of course. I mean, he's suggesting it's a negotiating tool, isn't he? On his Truth Social account, he's talking about how the Japanese are coming over and discussing things, how other countries are coming over and discussing things. He's open to having all of these meetings. So there you go. Fingers crossed, Tom.
Fingers crossed, but my goodness me, we're hearing a different thing out of the Trump administration almost every other day.
I don't know, he's been tweeting, he's been truth socialing the same thing for days.
But his chief trade advisor, who's the guy that came up with this tariff scheduling around the world, seems to believe that the United States must have completely balanced trade with every country around the world.
Oh, yeah, he does sound a bit of a nut-nut.
And he's written in the past, repeatedly, that a trade deficit, if you import more from a country than you export to it, that's equivalent to a knock in your GDP. That is so outside of the mainstream of economic opinions.
Yeah, he's not a free marketeer at all. In fact, very much the reverse.
Yeah, and when he ran in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, he was a Democrat. He ran to be the mayor of one of the cities in California on a no-growth platform.
Yeah, and not what you'd expect from the Republicans necessarily. But life is a roller coaster, eh? And it will be for one town here in the United Kingdom. Yes, Universal Studios is set to open their first theme park in Britain, and it will be in Bedford.
Yes, the theme park, which is set to be one of the largest and most advanced anywhere in the world, will bring nearly 20,000 jobs during the construction period, with a further 8,000 new jobs across the hospitality and creative industries when it opens in 2031.
Yes, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is championing this as a big success for the government.
Universal could have chosen anywhere in Europe to make this investment. The fact that they've chosen Britain, the fact that they've chosen Bedfordshire is a real sign of confidence in the local economy and in the national economy. And I'm delighted that we're able to make this announcement today.
Well, could the new theme park take a leaf out of the Blackpool Pleasure Beaches book? Perhaps it could. I think it might be a bit bigger, actually, by the looks of things. I'm not sure 28,000 jobs there are in Blackpool.
No, not anymore at least. But it does seem that this is going to be a huge boon to the Bedfordshire economy, that the arc that the government keep talking about between Oxford and Cambridge as this new growth area for the country. But what does it all mean for the rest of the country? Well, our very own North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper went up to Blackpool to find out more for us. And Sophie, you're there on one of the most famous beachfronts in the country.
Well, we're on one of the most famous beach runs inside one of the most famous theme parks in the country as well. We're here inside Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and of course you can see the very iconic big one with some very lucky riders just on their way to the summit just there. Now, in recent weeks there have been concerns about Blackpool Pleasure Beach. There were reported losses of around £2.7 million before tax. There were reports of ride closures, but we've spoken to Pleasure Beach today and they've assured us that actually those rides were closed because they were getting a bit old. The average age was around 40 years, and in fact their data showed that they were the least popular rides, and instead they're replacing those rides with a new ride that's costing a whopping £8.7 million, which will be the tallest ride in the UK of its kind. So lots of great things happening for Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but you might wonder, what do they make of the fact that there's going to be this huge billions of pounds spent in Bedfordshire as opposed to places like Blackpool or other resorts in other parts of the country? Well, earlier on we got the opportunity to speak to the CEO of the Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort, Amanda Thompson, and this is what she had to say.
Well, of course, I'm disappointed it's not in Blackpool, but I'm thrilled for the UK because any investment in our industry in the UK is great. This is the biggest investment in my lifetime in the whole of the industry for the United Kingdom. It's fantastic news. I have secretly been involved, though, because I know quite a lot of people in the industry, and they were asking me my opinion several years ago. So I've been involved right from the word go with everything for this whole deal. It's been fantastic. It's investment in leisure and entertainment, and that's what we love here, and it's being recognised as an industry, so people can actually go and work in this great industry. They can have fun at work.
So there we are, the money is actually being spent elsewhere and on another theme park, that Universal one opening in Bedford. But the CEO of Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort actually thinks it's a good thing for her resort and for the entire leisure and tourism industry here in the UK. That investment means more money for that industry, and it means that as a result more people are going to be going to tourism resorts like Blackpool Pleasure Beach all around the country. So there we are, the sun is shining, the sky is blue, and it looks like great news, not just for Bedfordshire but for our entire tourism industry here in the UK.
Fantastic stuff, Sophie Reaper. Thank you very much indeed for that report. I hope you're enjoying the Pleasure Beach yourself. Maybe you'll get on a ride later. I think I've seen Sophie Reaper report from a ride before.
Have you?
Yes, I think I have. I think it was perhaps, over a year ago. Perhaps she'll do it again for us later.
There's a challenge.
If they allow her. But yes, so the lady there doesn't see it necessarily as a negative competition, that everyone will go to the Universal Studios. She thinks it will just build the whole industry in this country, which is a nice way of looking at it.
And it does seem to be a good booming industry for us here in the UK because, as the Chancellor was saying, I mean, Universal Studios could have chosen Paris. I mean, they could have chosen Frankfurt. They could have chosen Madrid. I mean, if they wanted a bit more sun, but no, they picked it in the UK, and hopefully that will bring more people from Europe to the UK to use this.
Yeah, it's not really my thing, but I know other people enjoy it. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Going, gone. London is no longer among the top 5 cities favoured by millionaires and billionaires. There has been a mass exodus. Only Moscow has had more of an exodus. And where exactly does that put us? Pretty bleak. That's after your headlines with Sophia.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Your headlines at 12:34. China has announced it will retaliate with additional tariffs on US imports after accusing the White House of bullying practices. Beijing will now place an import tax of 84% on the US. That's a 50% increase from its previous levies. It comes after the US president escalated his trade war with the world's biggest exporter, with imposing a 104% tariff on Chinese goods. Elsewhere, Elon Musk has branded Donald Trump's trade czar dumber than a sack of bricks, suggesting there could be a growing split in the White House over tariffs. The Tesla founder said Peter Navarro was truly a moron after claiming the world's richest man was merely a car assembler rather than a manufacturer. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the Chancellor has rejected calls to launch a Buy British campaign in response to the tariffs, dubbing it too inward-looking. GB News can reveal that more people have now been jailed in Rotherham for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers than the number of grooming gang abusers jailed. Since last August, South Yorkshire Police have made over 100 arrests in connection with the disorder at the Asylum Hotel, of which 77 have now been jailed. This compares to only 68 convictions to date for group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation in the town. This comes as Labour announced they've dropped plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on grooming gangs. Now, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been speaking in Bedfordshire about a new deal securing the first universal theme park in Europe, set to open in 2031.
What a momentous day, what such an important day. And it's going to put Bedford on the map for millions of people, film lovers, people coming here for fun, people building their careers here. It'll create thousands of jobs for the local community.
The project is estimated to generate £50 billion for the economy, generating around 28,000 jobs for the UK. A Paddington Bear statue destroyed by vandals in March has been unveiled at a ceremony in Newbury.
3, 2, 1. Do it!
The newly installed statue was damaged on the 2nd of March when 2 Royal Air Force engineers broke it after a night out and made off with parts of it. And the King has met with Giorgia Meloni at her residence on the outskirts of Rome today. His Majesty spent the morning of his 20th wedding anniversary with the Italian Prime Minister at Villa Doria Pamphili, being welcomed on a red carpet and invited to inspect the guards drawn from the army cavalry. Charles and Camilla will mark 2 decades this evening as guests of honour at a state banquet in Rome. Yesterday, their trip was overshadowed by Prince Harry battling in a London courtroom to challenge the decision to downgrade his UK taxpayer-funded security. The Duke arrived at the High Court this morning for the second day of a 2-day hearing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2816 and €1.1605. The price of gold is £2,390 and 64 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,641 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past midday. Now, millionaires, they're increasingly moving out of London. That's according to new figures.
Yes, they show the proportion of super rich dropped more than anywhere else except Moscow. And we know what's happening when it comes to Russia. We know why people are leaving that country. Why are they leaving London?
Well, so drastic is the departure of the ultra-rich that the capital is no longer among the top 5 cities favoured by millionaires and even billionaires.
Well, should we even care about the ultra-rich leaving? There are people out there who celebrate this. They say, oh, well, they don't pay their taxes anyway, and good riddance, it'll make us all more equal.
Well, let's discuss this with the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins. Charlie, you yourself are someone who is in the process of upping sticks and leaving the capital. Why?
Well, obviously, why? Because of Labour. I mean, I left 9 months ago when they came into power. And I'm spending my time in Spain or Dubai, where I am at the moment. And I think there's 11,300 other millionaires left, plus billionaires, and that figure will continue. And some of these people that are left have got over 100 million. So this nonsense that the government come up with, I think 9 months ago, that people are not leaving, absolutely rubbish, absolutely lies. And more people will leave. No, who's prepared to put up with the Labour government and the taxes and the way that they're treating the working class people? If you can afford to go, then I would say go. And it's only going to get worse. You know, all they've created, I think, is they've got rid of 11,300 millionaires. and they've allowed in 50,000 illegals. I mean, how clever is that?
Yeah, I mean, who's going to pay for all of these asylum hotels, eh? We do know the richest in society pay an awful lot of tax, despite what some people will tell you. But is this about the specific tax changes, or is this more about vibes? Is this more about rich people feeling, actually, you know what, London doesn't really want me, Britain doesn't really want me. It doesn't seem as though, you know, with various changes to non-doms and business taxes and VAT on private schools, it's just kind of creating an atmosphere that London isn't the best place if you're aspirational.
Yeah, well, look, obviously London needs business people and people that create jobs and people that train people and people that contribute to society. Obviously they need them, but they just don't understand that, you know, business people now can go anywhere in the world and do their business. We don't have to be in the UK no more. I mean, Alfie Best, the billionaire, he's set up in America. I'm going to set up in Dubai. We're going to set up in Spain. We don't need London no more. I mean,
Charlie, don't you feel patriotic though to this country? Don't you feel a sense of,
yeah,
you know, don't you feel like you should stay here till the bitter end?
Well, look, I paid in over 125 million in tax.
It's quite a lot, isn't it?
They're trying to nick my OBE off me, which obviously that's blown out of the water now because they got no case against me. I mean, it's just shocking. The only place that more millionaires are leaving is Moscow. And the reason they're leaving Moscow is obviously because there's a war on. The only war we have on is Labour. They've created a war between the working class people and with and people that generally want to stay for the country. But no, I you know, I've had enough of them. Loads have had enough of them, and millions of people will continue to leave. And the only time we will come back is if and when they come out of power and hopefully reform get in.
Well, what do you say to those who say good riddance? Who say, do you know what, we don't need these people who have no attachment to the country, who'd rather go off and live a life in Dubai? What do you say to probably the fairly large proportion of Britain who think, you know what, good riddance?
Well, I say some good luck to them. I mean, why should we be taken for fools? You know, we're paid into the system long enough to help everybody else that don't put into the system. I mean, why should we even be bothering with that anymore?
Yeah.
And I think there's something like 245,000 sort of expats that have now applied to join into Dubai. So the situation is going to get worse unless Labour come out of power. We need to call a general election, get them out of power. If not, we'll be a third world country and there'll be no businesses left. There'll be nobody paying no tax. We'll be taking more money out of the pot than what we're putting into the pot.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. As ever, Charlie Mullins, of course, founder of Pimlico Plumbers and a millionaire who's decided to take his business elsewhere, or at least a lot of it. It's a bit of a depressing picture, isn't it, Tom?
It is, and it's precisely the opposite of the picture that we were seeing in the 1980s, when this country sort of got out of its sclerosis and started having this big boom. You know, all the business was being done here. We were talking about the City of London resurging. But I wonder how much of this is tax and how much of this is also what we saw from the last government, which tended to try with its levelling up agenda, sometimes to beat down on the parts of the country that were doing well. I wonder if actually there's some sense that the previous Conservative government started to whack the bankers and the City of London and all of this stuff because they were trying quite rightly to foster growth in other parts of the country, but maybe hitting the parts of the country that were growing has pushed people away too.
I also think it's got a lot to do with crime levels, actually. I think London used to feel a bit safer for rich people. Now you're worried that your house is going to be broken into, even if it's in Notting Hill or Belgravia or Chelsea or wherever, and you're worried that your Rolex is going to be snatched off your hand and all of that. But it does seem as though we're losing useful people and perhaps we're attracting the less useful.
Well, yeah, so if we're talking about net contributors...
Yes, we've got a lot of net takers coming in and a lot of net contributors leaving, which isn't great for a country that wants economic growth, is it?
But it's also why these immigration numbers, I think, are too simplistic sometimes, because we talk about absolute numbers of people coming in without talking about the kind of people who are coming in. I mean, if there are people coming in who are, you know, entrepreneurs with lots of wealth and business and all the rest of it, I don't think anyone would give a single fig about the numbers coming in. And yet, if it's people coming in mainly on the take, then that's obviously a negative thing for the country.
Yeah, or people who come in on boats across the channel and post ISIS videos online. Probably could do without them. But if you're in search of some spring sunshine away from the United Kingdom, please don't leave forever. We need useful people to stay in this country and pay tax, unfortunately. But here's the forecast for some of the top Euro holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms impacting Portugal and southwestern parts of Spain, but elsewhere across Europe we are going to see improving temperatures through the week. Initially some heavy showers affecting Tenerife and Madeira, eventually moving into parts of Portugal and Spain, but as we head our way further east, largely settled, lots of sunny spells and improving temperatures too, starting off in the mid-teens but increasing through the course of the week. And there'll be plenty of sunshine as we head into next week, the odd shower still affecting Tenerife, and that's where we'll see the best of the temperatures too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Interesting research here, because on the one hand it looks as though awareness of ADHD and the symptoms is rising because of TikTok and influencers promoting the symptoms of TikTok, but there's also research that suggests that usage of TikTok itself can cause ADHD. So how do we kind of untangle this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a double whammy, really, because I think, as you say, on the one hand, you've got this almost like social contagion of increased awareness of symptoms that either are ADHD or, as you have pinpointed, mimic ADHD. And we know that increased and excessive screen time, not just TikTok actually, but all social media time, mimics ADHD. Anyone that has a child and has witnessed their own child spending, obsessive time scrolling through social media or gaming and seeing what that does to a child, particularly, I think, young children's attention.
Yeah, my best friend, she was telling me, oh, yeah, I've known her since she was 4 years old. And she was chatting to me the other day and she goes, you know what? I've got ADHD. That's, well, if you've got it, I've got it. It's ridiculous. There are so many people saying they've got it. It's getting to epidemic proportions. Isn't it a bit ridiculous, all these people claim they've got it? What is it? What is it?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I completely agree. I think it is absolutely ridiculous. And I agree. I'm being tongue-in-cheek about TikTok. I do. My personal view is that TikTok is uniquely awful. I think it is absolutely mindless. Does anyone ever feel good after scrolling on TikTok? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there will be some people. So, I do accept these platforms are different for different people. I do think, though, we have to really ask, why is there this apparent explosion of ADHD and this rush for everyone to diagnose themselves?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 1. Now, negotiations to end the bin strikes in Birmingham have once again failed.
Oh, brilliant. The strike began on the 11th of March, with the Conservative Party today declaring a public health crisis in the region. Didn't know they could just do that.
Well, let's get all the information now with our reporter on the ground. Jack Carson has been braving the stench for us. Jack, what's the very latest?
Well, we've just had the finishing of one of these mobile collection services here in Hodge Hill, where I've been this morning. Quite the sight all morning, with just the sheer amount of rubbish that people have been bringing here to the area. Lines and lines of cars all lining up down the road, but also people just impatient to be able to wait in the queue to get rid of their rubbish and simply just dumping it, leaving the bin men to pick it up and try and pile it into the back of the lorries. But we've not just seen black bin bags, we've seen people bringing here sofas, I've seen mattresses this morning, and plenty of people just blatantly just fly tipping because they can't be bothered to wait to fill all their rubbish into these collection services. These are services which are being put in different wards around the area to try and get rid of that mass sheer of tons of rubbish. We know the council estimated yesterday that around 2,000 tonnes had been collected. In the background, of course, you were mentioning the talks going on between the council and Unite. Unite calling them intensive talks yesterday, but still no deal yet to be done. The council saying they were productive. Now, the negotiations have been going on since the start of this week to try and bring an end to this long-running dispute. But how are people feeling as it continues on and on every day? I've been speaking and catching up with some people here in Hodge Hill. Here's what they've told me.
I'm absolutely furious. This has been going on for many, many weeks now, a couple of months. I shouldn't have to be, after paying council tax, making my way to empty bins, and there's a service that's provided to do that.
Well, I think it's disgusting. It's been going on, for a month or so now. It happened, 7 or 8 years ago, and the council hasn't learned, and the electorate hasn't learned. It's clearly people electing the same old people who are incompetent, and they don't really care about the local community or the city.
It's all a game plan. This is just training the public to do it. They're doing it on purpose, slowly, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, this week. This is just training for the future.
What do you make of the state of Birmingham at the moment, the bins on the streets?
It's diabolical. Third world countries are better.
Yeah, you see there a lot of anger and frustration, mainly aimed at the council, not anybody blaming the bin workers for this, blaming the council seemingly. The council say that they understand the frustrations of residents. They're working to try and get this dispute ended. They say they're putting residents first, and we know collections are increasing. But while those collections take place, the situation with public health is one which is of concern. The Birmingham Conservative Party yesterday trying to put forward a motion to declare a public emergency within the council. That motion wasn't even allowed a vote yesterday at yesterday's council meeting, not even a summarising. It was just forced through without a decision. So the Birmingham Labour group seemingly not wanting to have that vote. And so those concerns around public health do continue with this strike and this dispute not finished yet.
OK, well, Jack Carson, thanks very much indeed for keeping an eye on this ongoing dispute for us there live in Birmingham.
Absolute disgrace, really. But in other news, Labour has dropped its plans for grooming gang inquiries, making the announcement on the final day before Parliament broke up for the Easter recess.
Well, later in the show, we'll be speaking to the Conservative frontbencher, Katie Lamb. Just take a listen to what she had to say in Parliament yesterday.
Home Secretary said the government would conduct 5 local inquiries into the rape gangs which have terrorised so many innocent children. Over 3 months since the government announced these local inquiries, Tom Crowther KC, a barrister invited by the Home Office to help establish them, knows almost nothing about their progress, and neither do we. Why is the framework for local inquiries now being led by ministers rather than by independent voices such as Tom Crowther? Why is the £5 million set aside for inquiries no longer being allocated, but instead delivered on an opt-in basis? And what does the government intend to do about local leaders who say there is no need for an independent inquiry, like in Bradford or in Wales?
She's not happy, is she, Katie Lamb? We're going to be speaking to her very soon, so do stay tuned. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Do stick with us. We're first going to show you a little bit of the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. High pressure is still in control of our weather. That means many of us are still going to continue to see plenty of that warm spring sunshine. But the exception is around eastern coasts. This is because areas of high pressure move in a clockwise direction, bringing an easterly flow to eastern shorelines. And that's dragging in some cloud from the North Sea, which is likely to linger around eastern coasts through much of the day. So feeling a little cooler here and those cloudy skies sticking around. But across the west, wall-to-wall blue skies and feeling warm in the sunshine. Perhaps just slightly breezier today across southern coasts, but in the sunshine, highs of 19, possibly even 20 degrees Celsius across western parts of Scotland, so feeling very warm and pleasant indeed. To end the day, we'll start to see more of that low cloud moving in from the North Sea as we head through into the evening, particularly across Shetland, Orkney, and then later on sweeping into eastern parts of Scotland. But the west of Scotland staying largely clear, and similar across Northern Ireland, fairly clear here, northwestern parts of England, but still that North Sea low cloud, sea fog eventually dragging its way into eastern areas. But Wales, most of Devon and Cornwall should stay largely clear overnight. But that means temperatures once again soon dipping away into the evening, soon turning rather chilly, and we'll see more and more of this cloud start to feed into parts of East Anglia, the southeast and central parts of England too, so quite a grey start to the morning as we head towards dawn, but still staying largely clear across Scotland and Northern Ireland. But chilly here, likely seeing some rural frost in places too, and overall it's going to be a fairly chilly night for many of us. So quite a cloudy start across central parts, southeastern areas as well. Eventually that cloud will burn away through the course of the morning, but it still could once again linger on around parts of East Anglia coast. Sussex and Kent could see some cloud around coastal areas too, but parts of northeastern England, an improving picture, much less cloud and feeling a lot warmer too, and generally a dry, nice day for all.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The A1 in Tyne and Wear is closed each way between junction 73 and 75, between Blaydon and the Dentonburn roundabout after an accident. There are queues each way from junction 70 at Dunstan, from junction 76 at Westerhope, and long delays too as you divert. The M1 in South Yorkshire is closed southbound between junctions 31 and 30 near Worksop because of animals on the motorway causing long delays. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is closed southbound where a car's overturned at Market Deeping, and in Essex, the A133 is blocked by an accident on Cowdrey Avenue in Colchester, causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is you're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 9th of April. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, China has slapped 84% tariffs on US goods as that war of words turns into an all-out trade war. The worrying escalation comes as apparent cracks, well, very much appear within the presidential circle, with Elon Musk branding a key Trump trade advisor a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks. His words, not mine. We'll have the very latest.
There's another word we're not allowed to say on television.
No, not this early, anyway.
Well, Universal Studios, in other news, are to open their first theme park in Britain. The attraction will be one of the largest and most advanced theme parks anywhere in the world, with an estimated £50 billion boost to the UK economy when it opens as soon as 2031.
That's a big boost, isn't it? Elsewhere, the King and Queen celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary as they continue their historic state visit to Italy. King Charles is set to address a joint session of Parliament in Rome later this afternoon. We'll bring that to you live.
And GB News can exclusively reveal the number of people jailed for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham has now exceeded the number of grooming gang abusers jailed in that same South Yorkshire town. It comes as Labour drops its plans for grooming gang inquiries on the final day before the parliamentary Easter recess.
So there are a lot of MPs who think that our response to these tariffs and the uncertainty should be to encourage people to buy more British. But apparently Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has said she's not going to put her name to this. She's not going to be, pushing for this. She doesn't want to put her face to this particular campaign. But we thought we'd debate it, because I'm sure there are lots of people out there who think we should, and others who think, well, if we can get cheaper goods elsewhere, why not?
I think you and I might have a slight disagreement of opinion here.
Oh, really? Test me.
I think you're more of a Buy British person.
I think if you can afford it, then it is a nice thing to do, to support British companies. And I do think there are some ethical questions over getting the cheapest products from the cheapest countries made by the cheapest people and the cheapest everything, certainly, particularly from hostile states like China.
Yeah.
But I do accept that it would push prices up, probably.
Yeah, I just think that we should specialise as things in a country. I think there are certain things that Britain should be doing that are the best in the world, and we focus on those areas. But then perhaps, like growing oranges, we're never going to be the best in the world or the cheapest in the world for growing oranges.
We make champagne now, don't we?
We do, and I'm sure it's very nice. But it's nice to have that broad array. There's a campaign that I did see a couple of days ago, which they were saying "Buy Back." Back being an acronym for British, Australian, Canadian, and Kiwi. Buy Back. That sort of alliance of those
So we don't go to Asia, we don't go to Africa, we don't go to anywhere else.
Well,
only English-speaking countries.
Well, it's particularly in support of our Canadian cousins,
brothers,
who we share a monarch with, who have been whacked harder than most by Donald Trump's tariffs.
Well, that's just as silly as saying don't buy anything from outside Britain.
Well, no, I think we should help the Canadians.
Okay, so you're picking and choosing now. Well, you're picking and choosing, Mr. Free Market Trader.
I'm just saying that maybe I'd like some maple syrup on my pancakes rather than honey.
Well, Meghan Markle's honey's off the market now for you.
There you go.
GBnews.com/yours. Do you think we should be focusing more on buying British? I mean, would you go as far as to ban trade from some countries? I don't know. Maybe you would. But it's the headlines now with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your headlines. China has announced it will retaliate with additional tariffs on US imports after accusing the White House of bullying practices. Beijing will now place an import tax of 84% on the US, a 50% increase from its previous levies. It comes after the US president escalated his trade war with the world's biggest exporter, imposing a 104% tariff on Chinese goods. Elsewhere, Elon Musk has branded Donald Trump's trade czar dumber than a sack of bricks, suggesting there could be a growing split in the White House over tariffs. The Tesla founder said Peter Navarro was truly a moron after claiming the world's richest man was merely a car assembler rather than a manufacturer. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the Chancellor has rejected calls to launch a Buy British campaign in response to the tariffs, dubbing it too inward-looking. But Deputy Lib Dem leader Daisy Cooper hit back at the Chancellor, telling GB News this morning the government should be encouraging us to buy British.
Government should be launching a big national effort to encourage people to buy British where they can and to make sure there's enough transparency about where products come from so people can make those informed choices if they choose to do so.
In other news, GB News can reveal that more people have now been jailed in Rotherham for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers than the number of grooming gang abusers jailed. Since last August, South Yorkshire Police have made over 100 arrests in connection with the disorder at the asylum hotel, of which 77 have now been jailed. This compares to only 68 convictions to date for group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation in the town. This comes as Labour announced they've dropped plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on grooming gangs. Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Kevin Hollenrake, told GB News it's allowing a cover-up to continue.
Well, I was appalled to hear that yesterday. I was in the chamber for that statement. And, you know, I mean, this means that the cover-up can continue. We know there was that some of the people within the local authorities concerned were complicit. We want a national inquiry, an independent national inquiry, which can set its own terms of reference, which can call witnesses, call for evidence, and make sure anybody who should be held to account is held to account for what's happened, because what's happened is an utter disgrace.
But Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, says an inquiry is not needed.
We're absolutely determined to make sure that we give local areas the tools that they need to tackle the problems in their communities, and we will hold them to account for it. Of course we will, and the Minister, Jess Phillips, is absolutely determined to do so. But what we won't do is pretend that just announcing inquiries is the way to solve this problem. In some cases we need inquiries, in other cases we don't. We need other measures, and that's what we're working with communities to do.
In other news, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been speaking in Bedfordshire about a new deal securing the first universal theme park in Europe, set to open in 2031.
What a momentous day, what such an important day. And it's going to put Bedford on the map for millions of people, film lovers, people coming here for fun, people building their careers here. It'll create thousands of jobs for the local community.
The project is estimated to generate £50 billion for the economy, generating around 28,000 jobs for the UK. Now, a Paddington Bear statue destroyed by vandals back in early March has been unveiled at a ceremony in Newbury.
3, 2, 1. Do it!
The newly installed statue was damaged on the 2nd of March when 2 Royal Air Force engineers broke it after a night out and made off with parts of it. A worrying new study has warned that paedophiles may be targeting children through their parents' dating apps. Researchers found men who sexually abuse children are nearly 4 times more likely to use dating sites than non-offenders. The unit found 66% of men who have sexually offended against children use dating platforms, and more than 22% use them daily. The Swipe Wrong report, surveying 5,000 men across the UK, US and Australia, found that single mothers are the most at risk. Experts are demanding tougher rules for dating apps, like bank-style ID checks and AI to spot predators. And the King has met with Giorgia Meloni at her residence on the outskirts of Rome today. His Majesty spent the morning of his 20th wedding anniversary with the Italian Prime Minister at Villa Doria Pamphili, being welcomed on a red carpet and invited to inspect the guards drawn from the army cavalry. Charles and Camilla will mark 2 decades this evening as guests of honour at a state banquet in Rome. Yesterday, their trip was overshadowed by Prince Harry battling in a London courtroom to challenge the decision to downgrade his UK taxpayer-funded security. The Duke arrived at the High Court this morning for the second day of the 2-day hearing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. At 1 1, we're going to kick off with the breaking news that China has now imposed an 84% tariff on US imports as the trade war dramatically escalates. This, of course, follows Donald Trump's 104% tariff announced overnight.
I wonder why they haven't gone like for like, and why have they chosen 84%? We'll find out for you. The announcement has led to a sharp drop in the global markets, as you might expect.
Well, let's get more with our political editor Christopher Hope now. A big escalation, Chris. How's this going to affect us here at home?
I think a great deal. This Trump slump, as it now must be called, is affecting millions of Brits. Now, April the 5th was the deadline for putting money into an ISA, when you can save £20,000 a year, protected from the tax man, £40,000 for couples. Many people have been putting money into their ISA up until the end of next week and would not have thought that in a stocks and shares ISA they would see their value of what they put into it just last week tumble by 6%. But the FTSE 100 is down this lunchtime by 3.5%, 278 points. There you see Donald Trump there unveiling the tariffs just last Wednesday. I mean, completely dramatic stuff here. We're waiting for the Dow Jones index to open at 2:30 p.m. No wonder that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, had a meeting this morning with retail investor groups, Lloyd's Charlie Nunn, Hargreaves Lansdown, Dan Olley, M&G's Andrea Rossi, and Legal & General's Antonia Simonis. Now, the Treasury is saying this morning the UK is a great place to invest. They've got a commitment, they say, to bolstering the UK's retail investment culture. Well, that has been completely hole below the waterline by Donald Trump's activities with tariffs. Many Brits might think, well, great that Trump wants to protect his own manufacturing industry, but why on earth should it hit our savings in this country? And of course, not even ISA savers, but pensioners too will be looking and through their fingers at the scale of what's happening with their investments. And earlier today, Rachel Reeves was up in Bedford announcing a huge inward investment, long planned, much talked about in the past. Universal Studios opening up a version of Disneyland Paris, but in the UK. And here's what she told reporters earlier.
Universal could have chosen anywhere in Europe to make this investment. The fact that they've chosen Britain, the fact that they've chosen Bedfordshire is a real sign of confidence in the local economy and in the national economy. And I'm delighted that we're able to make this announcement.
Delighted about the news, but it's been long mooted for a couple of years now. We had thought it might be announced back in January when Rachel Reeves set out her plans for spending. Now it's been announced, and finally some cheery news, I think, for many people. But right now it's a very, very difficult time on the stock market. Anyone with savings or pensions or anything like that invested in the stock market, look through your fingers and let's hope this chaos passes.
Shouldn't all just sit back, get the popcorn out, have a cup of tea and watch China and the United States go at it?
It's not a popcorn moment. It's very, very grim and very sad. Anyone who relies on their savings or relies on investments and has relied in the past that the market normally is a pretty stable place is worried. Now, the question now is whether this becomes what's known as a Liz Truss moment, with bond yields rising in the States. It might become a moment when you have the Fed stepping in to deal with this. It could end badly for Donald Trump, and that won't end well for anybody, I think. So there's concerns here that there might be a problem here, I think, with bond yields rising in the States. Again, all eyes at 2:30 when the Dow opens. Sorry, Tom.
This is a really, really crucial point, Chris, because initially when the stock market started to plunge, bond yields also went down as people moved their money from stocks to government bonds, a safer form of investment. So it did at first look like actually everything would be fine on that front. But it's only in the last 24 hours or so that bond yields have started to spike in the United States, perhaps because China is selling off some of those bonds. They hold a lot, perhaps because there's greater political instability in the United States. But whatever it is, that initial shoring up of the cheapness of US debt, and my goodness me, there's a lot of US debt. Now that debt is becoming more expensive to service, it's the same problem that Rachel Reeves had here in this country, and as you rightly say, Liz Truss too.
And it's really, I mean, Rachel Reeves may be appearing later on for questions from reporters, but what is really important for viewers and listeners to recognise, this may seem like a battle between two superpowers, China and the US, but it's directly affecting our pensions, our ISAs, millions of voters in this country. Until now, by the way, Sir Keir Starmer, the PM, hasn't spoken with Donald Trump since the Sunday before the tariffs were unveiled, a week last Sunday. I just wonder whether voters think is that wise? Why not talk to Trump and let him understand how people in this country are hurting because of choices made in Washington?
OK, well, Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed, our political editor there in Westminster, as this situation very much escalates.
Indeed. Well, let's get some more now. We're joined for analysis by the investment manager and friend of the show, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Justin, thanks for joining us. We saw a little rebound, actually, about this time yesterday, at 2:30 yesterday in the US stock market, only for, as soon as our show went off air, everything to collapse again. I don't know if it was our fault, but clearly markets very, very unhappy. And as Chris said, it's a concerning time for people with investments, particularly for people with pensions.
It is impressive to see what effect Emily can have on the markets. Be very wary indeed. I'm most impressed. This, I'm afraid, is actually very serious. This is not like other crashes and fallbacks we've seen before, be it COVID or .com, or even going back to the crash we had after Big Bang in '87. This is very different. This is sort of self-inflicted by a certain individual in the States. And the action he's now taken is amateur economics, because, of course, in the short term, anything coming into America is going to have these extra tariffs put on it, so it sounds great. I've got some extra money coming in. Until, of course, you see the effect of that, and that's what he and his advisors don't seem to understand. Putting tariffs up like this, I'm afraid, we learn from history, has a very bad impact, quite often on the people who actually put the rates up in the first place. So the issue I've got at the moment is, one, we're seeing this sudden sort of more of a push and concern about inflation coming through, because this is going to be inflationary. Maybe that was a big issue with Biden, and obviously one that Trump said he was going to solve. Well, that's going the other way. And the other one with that, of course, is actually is a potential for a recession. So a combination of recession and inflation, you get that terrible word that's been used increasingly over the past few weeks, which is stagflation, which is not an inflatable reindeer, but a very nasty sickness of the combination of the two, and very difficult to get out of. So actually what Britain needs to do, or more to point, bring it down to us as individuals. If we've got a pension scheme, it's a long-term investment. Markets have dropped, yes, but not by as dramatically as we've seen in many other examples. But the market is frightened, and that's why you're seeing the fragility, and you're going to see more of this volatility going on. Think as an investor, as a pension investor, you're there for the longer term. And also remember, the returns are not merely based on what some silly get in red braces tells you to go and buy and sell in terms of stocks, but it's the compounding of those dividends over time, over 10, 15, 20 years. That's how you create investment wealth. So for people who've got their SIPs and other pensions, which aren't necessarily the ones which are run by the companies, but ones they put money in themselves, hold hard, because actually this is something where the frightened people will get frightened out of it. Now is not the time to be selling out. But unfortunately, over the next few months, it's going to be a very nervous time. Now, what people have to realise, I suppose, they need a cutout of someone from Dad's army saying, no, don't panic, Captain
Well,
Mannering.
Justin, who's going to blink first here? We've got two massive economic powers fighting it out over tariffs. We've seen retaliatory tariffs going back and forth now, 104 on Chinese goods, 84 now on the other way. What happens next? Is there can one country come out on top here, Justin?
It's going to be very difficult. The Chinese don't want to back down because of a very oriental thing known as face. Don't lose face in front of other people. But also, last thing, the narcissist of the White House doesn't want to do that either. No, what you're going to have to sit here, I'm afraid, is going to be seeing, I'm afraid, some difficult few months, because how this ends up is you have to sit down and have an agreement as to what you're going to be doing. Have there been unfair tariffs? Yes, there are. Are there some areas which are out of kilter? They need adjusting and changing. But what you don't want want to do is megaphone views and opinions on how bad tariffs are without settling down and actually seeing what the real elements that can be adjusted here for fair trading around the world. Some people have been going on about globalization being evil. It has actually been very effective in actually building up value and wealth for people, particularly in the third world and other areas. So it's not even, but it's certainly lifted it up. But I think we have to be very careful.
This is the crazy thing about trade, right? It's very hard for people to understand how an exchange can make both sides better off. We're sort of born with this innate sense that if one side wins, the other side must lose. We can't understand how greater wealth for both sides can be achieved if both sides specialise in something. We, generally humans, because there's this experiment. There's this experiment that is done to children where you can ask a child, would you like to get one sweet, but your sibling gets 2 sweets, or you can get no sweets at all?
I'd rather have
invariably, the children always say, well, if they're going to get 2 and I'm only going to get 1, no one should have any sweets at all. And that's the zero-sum attitude that so many people take to trade, which is just not how it works.
It's not how it works. Unfortunately, our politicians don't have the understanding of this to really appreciate not just the danger, but also the way you need practically get out of this, which is to come back to around the table and reaching trade issues. Because we argue about China and America, who are, of course, in a symbiotic relationship with one another. Who's their largest trading partner for China? It's America. Who is one of the largest holders of American debt? China. So they can't do without each other. So time for certain people to be growing up.
Justin, just on that, there are political reasons, though, why a country like the United States may not want to be so dependent on a hostile state like China.
Yeah, of course there are. And what you've seen is manufacturing going to other areas, which is why you saw some of these issues over tariffs going to countries like Vietnam and Cambodia, because Chinese, quite rightly, have actually found other ways to produce things because other areas, because they realised they were attracting too much attention on themselves. Also, the broader issue for this, remember, for every electronic car they can't sell in America, what are you going to do with it? You're going to sell it somewhere else. OK, back in Europe. Then you get accused of dumping. Well, they all say, well, it's our cost of production plus something else. We can't sell it anywhere else. So it's really difficult. So we're back to the 1970s again. Everything except for flared trousers is rather embarrassing. I've probably got some somewhere. So a combination of a push towards recession, which we don't want, a push with regard to inflation. And so therefore you need calm heads to actually look at this and actually say, yes, there are going to be tariffs, but at a reasonable reciprocal level.
One of the benefits, Justin, of all this is that we get to talk to you more. So thank you very much indeed. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, thank you very much for explaining that all to us. It does seem as though we're going to have to hold on to our hats, our seats, whatever else. And our flares, yes. Bring them back out of the cupboard.
Yeah, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. And up next, in light of everything going on, is it time we buy more British? Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, thinks it would make Britain too inward-looking, but we will have that debate here next.
We're also building up to King Charles's historic speech to a joint parliament in Italy. What might he say? Stick around for that.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. High pressure is still in control of our weather. That means many of us are still going to continue to see plenty of that warm spring sunshine. But the exception is around eastern coasts. This is because areas of high pressure move in a clockwise direction, bringing an easterly flow to eastern shorelines. And that's dragging in some cloud from the North Sea, which is likely to linger around eastern coasts through much of the day. So feeling a little cooler here and those cloudy skies sticking around. But across the west, wall-to-wall blue skies and feeling warm in the sunshine. Perhaps just slightly breezier today across southern coasts, but in the sunshine, highs of 19, possibly even 20 degrees Celsius across western parts of Scotland, so feeling very warm and pleasant indeed. To end the day, we'll start to see more of that low cloud moving in from the North Sea as we head through into the evening, particularly across Shetland, Orkney, and then later on sweeping into eastern parts of Scotland. But the west of Scotland staying largely clear, and similar across Northern Ireland, fairly clear here, northwestern parts of England, but still that North Sea low cloud, sea fog eventually dragging its way into eastern areas. But Wales, most of Devon and Cornwall should stay largely clear overnight. But that means temperatures once again soon dipping away into the evening, soon turning rather chilly, and we'll see more and more of this cloud start to feed into parts of East Anglia, the southeast and central parts of England too, so quite a grey start to the morning as we head towards dawn, but still staying largely clear across Scotland and Northern Ireland. But chilly here, likely seeing some rural frost in places too, and overall it's going to be a fairly chilly night for many of us. So quite a cloudy start across central parts, southeastern areas as well. Eventually that cloud will burn away through the course of the morning, but it still could once again linger on around parts of East Anglia coast. Sussex and Kent could see some cloud around coastal areas too, but parts of northeastern England, an improving picture, much less cloud and feeling a lot warmer too, and generally a dry, nice day for all.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, it's 1:25. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, a shocking new poll shows that half of UK adults say they're now less likely to buy American products. Is it that shocking? In the wake of Donald Trump's tariffs on the United Kingdom.
Well, the Lib Dems who conducted the survey revealed almost 60% of people say they would support a campaign to buy more British-made goods following Trump unleashing his damaging trade war.
Yes, this comes as the party is calling on the government to launch a Buy British campaign to urge people to shop locally. But it looks as though the Chancellor isn't too interested in this particular campaign. She doesn't want to put her face or name to it. She says it's too inward-looking. So who's right? Is it time to buy more British, or indeed exclusively British? We're joined by farmer James Wright. James, thank you very much. And the Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, Maxwell Marlowe. James, I'll start with you. You're a farmer. Should we all be buying more British to combat Trump's tariffs?
Well, look, we should always be buying British, particularly British food, which is some of the best in the world. But it is quite funny that the Liberal Democrats, the party of rejoining Europe, are asking us to buy British when only a few years ago they were telling us to buy more from Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point, James. Should we bring Maxwell Marlowe in on this? Maxwell, your thoughts on this whole Buy British campaign?
Sure. I mean, I wish I had some cows behind me as well. That's a really great set you've got there, James. It's very
he's
good.
Winning on that front.
he certainly is. Unfortunately, it's just my bedroom at the moment. But back to the more serious point at hand, right, which is very simple, which is that if people want to buy brilliant British produce, whether that's the meat and dairy from James's cows, or if you want to support a really good, wine industry, let's look at, British sparkling wine beating the champagne houses of France as we go. Businesses can advertise and do that as they wish. We don't need the government to step in and tell people what's good for them. In this sense, consumers make up their own choice. And I think, in many ways, James and I are going to agree on this. We're just going to disagree about whether or not the government needs to get involved. And I don't think it does.
Right, so James, what do you reckon about what Rachel Reeves had to say not so long ago, that she doesn't want to get involved in this idea of backing a campaign to buy British?
Well, I mean, why do you need to encourage people to buy British food? Because it is some of the best in the world, and that's what the supermarkets do. Every day they've got campaigns out there encouraging us to buy their produce. But it's not just food as well, it's manufacturing too, and this is an opportunity to look at more buying more locally. But that shouldn't really be something the government is spending lots of money on. One area they should spend lots of money on is tourism. It's our third largest economy, but this week Labour have cut the amount of money by 41% they spend on our Great campaign. They've made people at Visit Britain redundant. That's the sort of place that the government should be spending money, getting people to come from abroad to spend money here, not getting more British people to buy British food, which is already on the shelves everywhere.
Well, Maxwell, what about national pride when it comes to this? I know we're looking at the economic theory and thinking, you know what, consumers can get cheaper products from elsewhere. They should have the freedom to do so. Fine, 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 fine. But what about when we're in a state of, we're in a trade war, we're in a global trade war, a little bit of national pride. You know, the French buy French, don't they? Why don't the British so much buy British?
It depends really what you want out of your trade. So, for example, I've got a mug of coffee here, which we're not going to be growing any coffee in the UK for a long time unless global warming really kicks off. We're not going to be getting much vanilla either. There are some things we really do rely on other countries for. So, I mean, let's actually look at stuff you need on farms, right? So, farming equipment, manufacturing equipment. We've got brilliant manufacturers like JCB, for example, who are really, really good. But you do need some quite specialist equipment that you're going to have to import from elsewhere. That's just how trade works. It's what we call, as David Ricardo even called it, specialization of labour. That really important stuff that we have to look abroad for. I think that's fine, and there is no shame in that, because we're going to send to, let's say, France, some of our brilliant Angus beef grown up in Scotland, for example, or some of the really nice, as I say, sparkling wine, the award-winning sparkling wine from Kent. We'll send it back to trade. It's simple trade. Just
are the French buying? Surely not. The French aren't buying our sparkling wine, are they?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Sacre bleu.
Well, James Wright, what do you make of the idea that, and quite a few economists have posed this question about the carbon intensity of producing food in the United Kingdom? I've seen a remarkable analysis that shows that it's actually less carbon intensive to buy New Zealand lamb ferried halfway around the world and sold in British shops, less carbon intensive than to buy British lamb because of the way that they rear their sheep.
Oh, that's fighting talk, that is.
What do you make of that sort of environmentalist argument to buy, perhaps counterintuitively, from further afield?
Well, that's all to do with the way that these things are measured. And in New Zealand, it's incredibly extensive. They've got huge areas of land that grow grass very well, whereas in the UK, we're much more productive. So we spend, we put in fertilizers, we use more diesel. That's why the carbon intensity is maybe slightly higher. I think farmers would argue about the nitty-gritty on that. But the point is, in the UK, we are in this rain belt of warm enough weather where we can grow crops and grass incredibly well, and we should be encouraging and supporting our farmers to produce food, not encouraging them to rewild and exporting our environmental damage somewhere else, which is exactly what the government are trying to get us to do. So it's all about making sure that we use our natural competitive advantage of being a great climate for growing crops to do so.
OK, well, thank you very much to you both, Maxwell Marlowe and James Wright. And James, thank you very much for naming your heifer after me. That was
behind me.
It's behind you. Oh, go on, point her out.
Is that Emily?
All up in the field just over there.
Is that me there, James? Is that me?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic stuff.
They're all growing well.
Fantastic. Oh, goodness me. It's,
brilliant stuff.
Keeping it in the family, aren't we?
Thank you very much. Maxwell Marlowe and James Wright there. Lots of you have been getting in touch about this one. Lots of you saying that we should be buying British, that you already do buy British and that you do look out for it. Anne says, remember, a lot of taxpayers' money is sent to the poor country's farms to make food, just for us to import it at a cheaper price. Yes, this is a bit of a scandal for the farming community, that actually we're spending a lot of foreign aid on farming outside of this country. To
subsidise other countries' farms when we then tax our farmers to the hills. Yeah, questionable.
But Lisa says, I buy British goods wherever I can. Rich says, I'm with you. Why not buy British? Amazon Germany points out German products. Does it? Oh, so well, if you go on Amazon in Germany, it puts the German products first. Really?
That's interesting. But of course, I mean, in UK supermarkets, you see the British flag on your sausages that are coming from this country, and you won't see that flag on others. So we do also have those sort of promotions.
Well, there you go. And Sarsi says UK and New Zealand lamb are both cheaper than French lamb in French supermarkets. So there you go. But the French, I don't know, they always say that they're willing to spend more on their food than other countries because it's such a, a big part of their culture.
Yeah, they do. They're the reason why the Common Agricultural Policy in the European Union is quite so generous.
Very subsidised. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Keep your views coming in. We've got lots more coming up. Yes, King Charles is about to make history as the first British monarch to address a joint session of the Italian Parliament. There we are. That is the Italian Parliament.
Yeah, there you go. So that's to come very, very shortly. Stick around after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. Your headlines at 1:33. China has announced it will retaliate with additional tariffs on US imports after accusing the White House of bullying practices. Beijing will now place an import tax of 84% on the US. That's a 50% increase from its previous levies. It comes after the US president escalated his trade war with the world's biggest exporter, imposing a 104% tariff on Chinese goods. Elsewhere, Elon Musk has branded Donald Trump's trade czar dumber than a sack of bricks, suggesting there could be a growing split in the White House over tariffs. The Tesla founder said Peter Navarro was truly a moron after claiming the world's richest man was merely a car assembler rather than a manufacturer. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the Chancellor has rejected calls to launch a Buy British campaign in response to the tariffs, dubbing it too inward-looking. GB News can reveal that more people have now been jailed in Rotherham for rioting at a hotel housing asylum seekers than the number of grooming gang abusers jailed. Since last August, South Yorkshire Police have made over 100 arrests in connection with the disorder at the asylum hotel, of which 77 have now been jailed. This compares to only 68 convictions to date for group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation in the town. This comes as Labour announced they've dropped plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on grooming gangs. Now, 5 people have been rushed to hospital after a police chase went wrong, leaving at least 5 police cars wrecked and a major dual carriageway shut. A section of the A1 near Denton in Newcastle remains closed in both directions following the multi-vehicle collision on the northbound carriageway shortly before 2:30 a.m. Images from the scene show 4 marked police vehicles badly damaged, a car on its side and debris scattered across the carriageway. Crash investigators have been sent to the scene of the pile-up. Now, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been speaking in Bedfordshire about a new deal securing the first universal theme park in Europe, set to open in 2031.
What a momentous day, what such an important day. And it's going to put Bedford on the map for millions of people, film lovers, people coming here for fun, people building their careers here. It'll create thousands of jobs for the local community.
The project is estimated to generate £50 billion for the economy, generating around 28,000 jobs for the UK. And London is no longer one of the top 5 wealthiest cities in the world after losing a higher proportion of millionaires than anywhere other than Moscow. An annual report on global wealth says the UK's capital has lost $11,300 millionaires over the past year. In total, London has lost 12% of its richest residents since 2014, with the decline being attributed to tax increases, Brexit and the fall in the value of the pound. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For a chance to win a motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text BONUS to to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, how fierce is the competition to become Lord Sugar's next business partner? Well, our final guest today has been in the throes of that competition.
Goodness me, yes. Liam Snellen is taking part in the current series of The Apprentice, and he worked as an electrician for 10 years, and now he's turning his hand to making comfortable yet fashionable workwear. So there you go.
Well, I just want to ask what it's like to be a contestant on The Apprentice, having been a fan of the show for years prior. Is it a bit weird?
Yeah, do you know what? I wouldn't say it's weird. I feel like you can manifest anything in life, you know, and over 10 years ago I said that I wanted to be on the show with no real business at the time and not knowing how I was going to do it. But as I said, I manifested it and I'm here and on the show.
You manifested it? How did you manifest it then? Go on.
Well, you just need to vision that something has already happened, you know, you just haven't attained it yet, so you just need to attain the frequency to achieve that thing, and that's obviously what I've done, and it's my time.
Liam, are you still on the show?
I am still on the show.
How far did you make it?
So, well, you have to wait and see. You have to wait and see. Obviously,
could be the winner.
Yeah, could be. So we had a little bit of banter about a hot sauce. I was licking a plate, which was a bit embarrassing. So we was doing an advertisement for our hot sauce brand. We didn't actually have the bottle, so we needed to sort of think on our feet and make an advert without having the product.
How long are you in the boardroom? Obviously, it has to be sliced down to an hour, but you must be in there for a long time, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So obviously, you're in there a lot longer than what it shows. You know, it's such a small part of the show when really you're in there for like up to a couple of hours. So it's a really intense period. Like, they definitely go into all of the task and the good things and the bad things that happened, and then obviously the key highlights get shown to the public.
The People's Channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB.
Very soon indeed, but yes, we've flown over to Rome for you to catch what the King will say. And I wonder what he will say. He'll focus presumably on our relationship with Italy. Perhaps he'll mention the beautiful architecture that he's seen and how important it is for Italy and the United Kingdom to be strong allies.
Absolutely, but of course we do hear he will be using a bit of his own Italian in this speech. So I wonder how much he will say in Italian for the benefit of the assembled deputies there in the Italian Parliament. But it's a bit of a shame that it's not a sort of a monarchy-to-monarchy visit. Back in 1946, the Italians had the option to establish their new country after the war as a republic or as a monarchy. And by 54 to 46%, they voted to be a republic. And I just think that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I do think it's a mistake too, actually, for the Italians. I think they could do with a nice monarch and monarchy to go with their beautiful culture in many ways. But I'm sure they would disagree.
Well, maybe. Although, I mean, Italy's not been the most stable country over sort of the post-war era. I mean, there's been a running joke how many prime ministers they've sort of flipped through. Perhaps a head of state who was a sort of a stable, staying presence would have helped some stability in that country.
Yes, there is political chaos, isn't there? And there will be a lot of soft power going on at the moment. Discussions. David Lammy's been there in Rome, probably talking about illegal migration and other issues with Giorgia Meloni. But let's go to Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, to keep us going until the King does arrive for his speech, his address to Parliament. Cameron, do you have any idea of what King Charles might like to say today?
Oh, I suspect he's going to be speaking a little bit in Italian, Emily, as well as in English. I'm told that he's planning to hail the UK and Italy strong relationship, and he's also going to emphasise the underlying deep ties between the two countries. And I think that's code for the King is going to really deploy his soft power here to strengthen relations. Of course, he is the first British monarch to address a joint session of the Italian Parliament. He's only the fourth non-Italian to do so. The first was Pope John Paul II, and then we had King Juan Carlos of Spain and King Felipe of Spain. So, you know, it's a very rare opportunity for that.
That's very interesting. So he's only the fourth non-Italian to address Parliament in this way.
Yeah, he absolutely is, Emily, and I think that perhaps shows the kind of respect that he musters here over in Italy. Of course, we're 5 years on now from Brexit, aren't we? And I think what we've seen from the UK government, bearing in mind it's the UK government that sends the monarch on these state visits, is first to France, first to Germany, I should say, then to France, and now here to Italy. So that's 3 European parliaments where the King has become the first British monarch to address a joint session of each of those parliaments, which suggests the British government is really emphasising trying to strengthen relations between European nations. But we saw the Prime Minister Meloni with the King this morning. It was the first private audience she had had with His Majesty. I was there covering it, and I think that's significant because we know that the UK and the Italian government, particularly with Prime Minister Meloni, is working with Sir Keir Starmer to tackle illegal migration, for example, emphasising shared defence ties as well, particularly, of course, remember, we are 2 NATO allies in the face of Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. It's those kind of topics which we could see little hints of in the speech. Now, of course, the King is not going to go full on political in the speech. That's up to politicians such as David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, who is also in the building behind me. But it opens the doors by the King doing these kind of engagements, delivering these kind of speeches. I think that is something that is going to, you know, speak volumes here. Another thing to point out, of course, is it's their 20th wedding anniversary today, the King and Queen. And we have been told that the Queen today, and you may be able to see pictures of her shortly, if not already, wearing her original wedding dress from 20 years ago in 2005 when she was married in the Guildhall in Windsor. It's a Anna Valentine dress, repurposed with extra embroidery by the King's Foundation artist Beth Sanderville, and that is really poignant, isn't it? Because it's 20 years to the day that the two of them got married. We've already saw those 3 beautiful photographs of them inside the UK, and well, outside in the garden of the UK ambassador's residence a couple of days ago on the day they arrived in Rome. And now we've got this nod from Queen Camilla to her husband 20 years on from their marriage. What are we going to get from the King? Well, I suspect if he doesn't say anything about it in this speech that he's got here at Parliament, he is going to be delivering another speech tonight at the state banquet being held in both their Majesties' honour. It's a black tie affair, so we're not going to see Queen Camilla in a tiara, unfortunately. But he is expected to deliver a speech there as well. Perhaps that kind of occasion is better for the anniversary rather than, of course, a political parliamentary speech.
Thank you very much, Cameron. We'll be right back there in Rome when the King does appear. Queen Camilla, apparently she's reworn her wedding dress a number of times. This won't be the first time. I can't imagine it myself.
Well, sustainability is at the heart of this modern
I can't imagine wearing it again.
Once before.
Well, perhaps, you know, why not?
Yes, a big thank you to Cameron Walker, who's, of course, outside the Parliament building there. The King and Queen inside it, but perhaps they're lost, making their way to the chamber.
Well, shall we quickly turn to the Universal Studios that are set to open their first theme park in Britain, and it's going to be in, drumroll, Bedford.
Well, the theme park, which is set to be one of the largest and most advanced anywhere in the world, will be bringing nearly 20,000 jobs during the construction period, with a further 8,000 new jobs across the hospitality and creative industries when it opens at the end of the decade.
But there's already a thriving seaside resort theme park, isn't there, in Blackpool? So let's head there now, where our North West reporter Sophie Reaper is soaking up the sun. Sophie, thank you very much. Are they worried about the competition up in Blackpool?
I don't think they are over at Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort. We spoke to them earlier. We spoke to their CEO, Amanda Thompson, and she said that actually she's grateful for that investment. It's the most investment in the industry she's ever seen in her lifetime. And in fact, she thinks that's going to be beneficial across the board for the industry. However, what about the rest of Blackpool? This is a town where tourism is right at the bedrock. So to talk a little bit more about that now, we're entering the South Shore Pit Stop Cafe, and we can speak now to the owner, Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on GB News. Now, we've heard about this investment in Universal. Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort are excited about that because they think that's going to bring money in to them. But what about you here in South Shore? Do you think that will be beneficial to you, or in fact, is it a bad thing?
I think it's a bit of both. We need tourism in our cafe to keep us alive. Without the tourism, we don't stay alive. I don't want our anybody to be feeling like they have got nowhere to go. So we're a very much community cafe for mental health. But the impact on the tourism, if it drops, businesses suffer, into staff suffer, and into mental health increases as well.
So do you worry perhaps that if customers of the tourism industry are going to head down to Bedford instead to the Universal Resort, do you worry about the knock-on impact, not just on Pleasure Beach, but also as Blackpool as a town as a whole?
Massively, massively. The Pleasure Beach do bring a lot of customers into ourselves because we're not far from there. So when people are going to the Pleasure Beach, they do stop here, have something to eat, then go on to the Pleasure Beach. If people are going elsewhere, the tourism around this area will drop, and it will have a massive impact on us all.
I know that the impact is something you've seen already here. You mentioned to me earlier about the decline in tourism and how you felt that here. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for ourselves as a cafe, the stuff that we do, we are finding job losses because of decline in tourism. Businesses are not staying open. That job loss then incorporates that person to suffer with issues around mental health. Ourselves here, we're Orange Button trained, we're crisis trained, we're a safe, warm space. We're seeing more customers coming in just for somebody to talk to, not necessarily being able to afford a meal, but that's why we have our Pay It Forward board, because we don't want anybody to be on their own.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Now, it seems that Blackpool Pleasure Beach Resort think this is a good thing, but perhaps there are people in Blackpool who don't necessarily agree, Sarah included.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed, Sophie Reaper. Very interesting to hear from a local business person there. I mean, hopefully there's enough business to go around.
Yes, and you'd think that this new theme park, this massive new theme park in Bedford, is not just about moving people within the United Kingdom, but actually attracting visitors and tourists from the whole of Europe to come to this sort of site that the Chancellor was saying earlier. This could have been, it could have been built in Paris, it could have been built anywhere across Europe, but they chose Bedford, which hopefully should bring some more tourism into the UK too.
Yeah, perhaps you at home think it's a shame it wasn't in Blackpool. But do let us know, gbnews.com/your say. But we are going to head straight back to the Italian Parliament in Rome. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is there as we wait for the King, King Charles, to deliver an address to Parliament. Cameron.
Hi there, Emily. Yes, the King has arrived in Parliament in the last 15 minutes or so, alongside his wife, Queen Camilla. Of course, they're celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Now, there's a lot of noise behind me. I think it's all the police motorbikes, of course. There's been a lot of police escorts coming in and out of this building over the last hour while we've been stood here. Let me tell you, even David Lammy, of course, Foreign Secretary, got one too. Behind the police bikes, you may be able to see the state Bentley that the King and Queen travel around in. The King wants to be seen, doesn't he? He's not in a blacked-out Range Rover. he is very much in a car with big windows so the Italian public can see him. And that is, you know, kind of the point, isn't it? Because it is that soft power strengthening relations between two nations. And that's kind of the main broad theme, I think, of this speech, emphasizing the shared values of the United Kingdom and Italy, particularly when it comes to defense ties. Maybe he'll mention illegal migration. We know Prime Minister Meloni is pretty hot on that, but of course he'll have to be mindful of course, that he can't stray too far into politics. The Bentley itself has been kind of shipped over from the United Kingdom, so it's not permanently in Italy. But the King and Queen have had a busy day already, so they actually started the day separately. So the King was having a private audience with Prime Minister Meloni. It's the first time the Prime Minister has had a private chat with His Majesty the King. Now, Buckingham Palace keeping incredibly tight-lipped as to what was discussed, but of course in front of the King, or behind the King I should say, is Foreign Secretary David Lammy and his Italian counterparts, who will be taking part in those political meetings. If we get any details on what was discussed, we will of course bring that straight to you. The King and Queen then split off, as I said. The Queen visited a local state school here in Rome, where she was championing her passion, really, the importance of children and children's literacy and learning to read. She was also given a wedding anniversary card from the children. She was given a pizza as well as a gift, so, you know, like a takeaway box of pizza. So I'm not sure if Her Majesty ate it for lunch or not, or if she politely just took it. But she did pose for photographs with the pizza and with the children. She also took part in a walkabout as well with the school children, who were waving Italian flags and British flags too. Meanwhile, the King, he went to a local theatre, met with Rome drama students, and also in the same venue, I'm not quite sure how that works, but he also started talking about, or seeing sustainability in some of the sustainability initiatives which Italy is working on, which, as we know, of course, is King Charles's passion. He will be
Cameron, can I just interrupt you? We're just watching the
chamber very shortly.
Yes, sorry, we're just watching the Foreign Secretary actually arrive at the Parliament. He'll be watching and listening as King Charles addresses the Parliament. So there you go. What other figures from the United Kingdom will be there besides the King and Queen? Do we know of any others?
In terms of politicians, we do just expect it to be David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. Of course, he's got his own separate team. Clearly, Buckingham Palace has a pretty big team here as well. But as well as that, we've got the UK ambassador to Italy, Lord Llewellyn, who is hosting the King and Queen at his private residence in central Rome. I was lucky enough to be there last night, actually, for the reception, covering the reception of the Italian and British communities here in Rome, and it was all very lovely. The embassy, the ambassador even spoke to us when we first arrived here in Rome, talking about how excited Italians have been for the King and Queen to be here. He even said the owner of his local pizzeria was asking about the King's upcoming visits, which perhaps shows kind of how excited they are for the King to be here. But of course, it is the ambassador which represents the United Kingdom here in Italy, so his team would have been busy working on all the different elements which we're seeing in this pretty packed schedule. And of course, I think there's around 17 engagements the King and Queen are taking part in over the next 4 days or so. We know, of course, the King has been diagnosed with cancer. He's still undergoing cancer treatment, and he did have a minor blip, didn't he, a couple of weeks ago, where he ended up in hospital. But despite the fact a third of these engagements have gone away, because of course the Pope Francis, his health has deteriorated a little bit and he is recovering from pneumonia. What Buckingham Palace has done, instead of giving the King a bit of a break, they've added to the existing engagements to make them slightly longer. So extra elements have been added, which I think just shows that King Charles is not prepared to slow down. If anything, he wants to speed up and maintain his workaholic kind of ethos.
Yes, it does look like the room is filling up, doesn't it?
It does, certainly. But of course, the King will have very much enjoyed visiting those actors yesterday, or earlier today, I should say, having been a bit of a thespian himself at university, Cameron.
Yes, he was. He really developed a love of Shakespeare while at university, and he performed in many of those plays. Perhaps in another life, if he wasn't heir to the throne, he would want to be an actor. But I think he's also patron of the Royal Shakespeare Company. He's visited Stratford-upon-Avon, the headquarters, really, of of Royal Shakespeare Company, of course, Shakespeare's birthplace as well, on a number of occasions. I don't believe he's been there as king, but yes, I'm sure he would have enjoyed speaking to those drama students here in Rome. And of course, he does occasionally, secretly, go to the theatre sometimes in the UK, in the London's West End, as does Queen Camilla. The king also very fond of the opera as well, so occasionally he's kind of spotted doing those kind of private visits. So he does have a
When you
life
say
outside of his
secretly,
royal
I'm imagining he doesn't go in dark glasses and a wig, as Princess Diana was sometimes thought to do. I suppose it's just more unannounced.
In the back entrance, yeah.
Yeah, I suspect it's probably more unannounced. Whether he's in a box, I'm not sure. I mean, even if a photograph did end up on the internet, I don't think us as broadcasters would publish it. It's because, of course, we have a rule here in this country, don't we, that we don't kind of publish paparazzi photographs of members of the royal family after everything that did happen, of course, with Princess Diana. But yes, I think on the whole, he gets the balance right, doesn't he, His Majesty the King? And because he's got that Shakespearean experience, Tom, and being a thespian himself on the stage, he's very good at delivering speeches, isn't he? A number of which he's doing this week. You see the link I did there.
That was a fantastic segue, but we are expecting the King to take, really, well, to the stage, for want of a better metaphor, there in the Parliament in just a minute or two's time. But Cameron, this is, of course, one of the magical benefits of having a royal family, that we can attract this sort of attention and sense of occasion. While our Prime Minister has been busy in Bedford today, all focus in Italy is on this address from our King. I mean, it's the sort of secret weapon we have in diplomacy. We've seen what a state visit being offered in a letter from the King has done to our relationship with Donald Trump as well. You might not think that Keir Starmer would be someone who gets along well with Donald Trump, but he's been able to use that royal sort of ace up his sleeve. And I suppose it's a similar case in Italy.
Well, exactly. We don't know exactly what's going to be in the King's speech, but of course it's going to have been run past and possibly slightly written by the UK government or government officials in consultation with Buckingham Palace, of course. And they know the power of His Majesty's words, so they will be very mindful that journalists like us are going to be analysing every line of this speech for any subtle message which
Cameron,
he's trying to
just to interrupt you, sorry, we've just seen Queen Camilla and King Charles arrive, and Queen Camilla is wearing her wedding dress from 20 years ago.
Wow, well, they're walking there through that joint session of both houses of the Italian Parliament, being applauded to the rafters as the King gets up there, getting ready to make his speech. Shall we listen in to what the Italian deputies and indeed senators are listening to there in that joint session of Parliament?
Yes.
The Italian Parliament is upstanding as they listen to the British national anthem. The King standing up too as we await his historic address.
Presidente del Regno Unito, di Gran Bretagna e Irlanda del Nord, signora Presidente del Senato.
As the President of the Chamber of Deputies introduces King Charles there, we are awaiting King Charles' speech, which will be mainly in English, although we hear a touch of Italian might be added in. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, is there just outside the Parliament. And Cameron, both national anthems played before this introduction.
Yes, they did indeed, and I can actually tell you slightly what this introduction is saying with an English translation. He is saying, Your Majesties, the UK and Italy are tied by history and of friendship and of mutual admiration, and we will get to that translation as it kind of is happening. But of course this is very symbolic, isn't it, because this is only the 4th time that a non-Italian has had the opportunity to address both houses of Parliament here in Italy. He's actually stood on what's called the President's podium. Of course, the President of Italy is the head of state, the King, head of state in the United Kingdom. Of course, if he does start delivering his speech, we will bring that straight to you. But this is soft diplomacy in action, Tom and Emily. The King being here on what's been described by many people now as a truly historic day. The King addressing both houses, delivering a speech on behalf of the United Kingdom and strengthening the ties between the United Kingdom and Italy. Don't forget, it is the British government and Sir Keir Starmer who sends the the King even on a state visit such as this, because they want to strengthen relations between Italy and the UK. We saw Prime Minister Maloney in the UK a couple of weeks ago working with Sir Keir Starmer on tackling illegal migration and also emphasising the shared defence ties between the UK and Italy, notably, of course, being two NATO allies. I have a few more details for you of what's being said. They say there is a deep-seated trust in the values of democracy and freedom, and we, very poignantly actually, we all remember the visit by the late Queen with great fondness in the 2000 Jubilee year. So what was that, 25 years ago? He goes on to say, we are delighted to welcome King Charles III, the first British monarch to address this chamber. Of course, both houses of Parliament are inside that building listening to His Majesty's speech, and they have also issued an extended welcome to Queen Camilla, 20th wedding anniversary of their Majesties. Of course, 20 years to the day that the two of them got married in the Guildhall in Windsor in a civil ceremony, and then were given a blessing in St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, after, of course, Queen Elizabeth II gave them the ultimate blessing to marry in the first place. They're also now speaking about the origins of the values that lie with the Magna Carta, of course, that ancient document which basically sets out the rules of part of our unwritten constitution here in the United Kingdom, and talks about embarking upon our shared path. And of course, he is still continuing speaking to His Majesty, and this is only the first of two speeches His Majesty is about to deliver, but this, I think, perhaps is the most important one to listen to carefully. The reason being is this is the one where he will be talking about, let's say, some of the world issues which are going on at the moment. We are expecting the King to talk about the shared ties between the UK and Italy, which suggests to me that perhaps defence is going to be going to be mentioned, particularly when it comes to the Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. I suspect he may nod, of course, to the 20th wedding anniversary. Whether or not he mentions migration, we'll have to wait and see, but we know, of course, Prime Minister Maloney is particularly keen on that one. But also the shared cultural ties. We talked earlier, didn't we, Tom, about, of course, the King visiting some drama students here in Rome, very keen on Shakespeare himself. The Queen with children's literacy, of course, she's not going to be delivering a speech. But sometimes the royal family does things in images rather than words, don't they? And I think Her Majesty re-wearing her wedding dress from 20 years ago is a pretty solid symbol that she is very keen to mark the occasion of their 20th wedding anniversary.
Certainly. Now, we should say that the King is flanked by both the President of the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house, and the President of the Senate of the Republic as well, the upper house. The President of the Senate being Ignazio La Russa. He's just to the right of the King, and to the King's left is the man speaking at the moment, the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Lorenzo Fontana. Now, this is quite the long introduction for the King, but of course it is important to lay out exactly what is going on there. And Cameron, Cameron, as you mentioned, even going back to 1215, going back to the Magna Carta, sometimes perhaps a touchy subject with the royals, because of course that was the first document that really said the royals don't have absolute power and we should keep them in check.
Yes, and now King John is buried in Worcester Cathedral, Tom, indeed, from all those years ago. But King Charles III, of course, the current king, is very much inside that building behind me in Italy's capital. They are now talking about, funnily enough, the cultural similarities, particularly when it comes to Shakespeare and Verona, of course, where that famous play Romeo and Juliet is set, and that famous balcony. I'm not going to ask you to start quoting Shakespeare.
In fair
Tom,
Verona, where we lay our
like
scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood lays civil hands unclean, from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of ancient lovers take their life in
Oh, Cameron, look what you've done.
Anyway, Tom. Anyway, Tom.
Bury their parents' strife.
Anyway, Tom. Let me talk about what else is being on, but very good, Tom. Congratulations.
Yes, please, Cameron.
We are talking now about slightly more serious matters now of defence ties. As we mentioned, of course, NATO, the UK and Italy are very much part of that, and they are working together. If you remember 3 or 4 weeks ago, the King became the first monarch in a number of years, I think, to visit a British Royal Navy ship at sea. That was the HMS Prince of Wales, one of our 2 flagship aircraft carriers. And we believe that HMS Prince of Wales will be joining its Italian counterparts on a shared NATO mission in the next few weeks. That's what we were told earlier this week. So it's those kind of issues which are going to be raised perhaps during the King's speech. He's also talking about the fact that both Italy and the United Kingdom are part of the G7 network of world economies. So perhaps the shared economy is going to be mentioned. And of course, that's very a big topic at the moment, isn't it? Because where are we now? About a week on since President Trump announced those tariffs on the UK and the EU, which clearly is affecting both British and Italian exports quite significantly. Of course, the UK no longer part of the EU, so had less tariffs. However, of course, that now means that the UK still wants to be friendly with its closest neighbours, i.e. Italy and the European Union. So perhaps there'll be some kind of nod to that. The King is also, sorry, just reading down a load of translations, but I'm guessing on my phone screen here, they are continuing to celebrate the deep ties between the 2 countries. As you can tell, it's all happening in real time, and we're just giving it to you as it happens. So it's all very exciting here on GB News.
Very exciting. There are, of course, lots of ties. Yes, as you mentioned, defence, migration, of course, economic ties in light of all the global trade war that seems to be escalating, cultural ties as well. Just how important is this type of visit for the Italians?
Well, I think it is pretty important because, of course, it is the UK government that obviously sends the King to Italy, but it is Italy who is hosting the United Kingdom's head of state, King Charles III. So they will equally be wanting this visit to be a success. Of course, they would have invested a lot of money in this trip as well because of all the extra security they're having to lay on for the King and Queen, but also Foreign Secretary David Lammy and other dignitaries. Also the extra security just in terms of crowd control, because there's a huge crowd that's gathered behind me here outside the Parliament building, who the King may or may not be meeting a little bit later on. But then we also have other elements of the state visit. We've seen all these guards of honour turn up at most of these public engagements here for the King and Queen. All of that military money, of course, the military soldiers are having to be taken away from the actual fighting part of their job and do the ceremonial part of their job. So all of that costs money as well. So the question is there a cost, is there a benefit to all of this cost? And it would suggest that both the British government and the Italian government thinks that it is worth it because of that strengthening of relations, that soft power which the King musters. And what the British ambassador told us a few days ago was it's these kind of memories that will last a generation. So when it comes to, I don't know, doing trade negotiations or collaborating more on defence or collaborating more on protecting the English Channel from small boats coming across onto the south coast of England, it's the King's being here and the state visit which kind of opens the doors to those kind of discussions. So that's why there is such an emphasis on both the British government and the Italian government on making this trip a success.
And Cameron, as you say, what an honour for the King to be just the fourth person, non-Italian person in history to address a joint session of both houses of the Italian Parliament. Although I suppose one of the disadvantages of that is we not only have to listen to the introductory speech of the President of the Chamber of Deputies, but also now, as we're listening to in the background, the introductory speech of the President of the Senate of the Republic, the upper house as well as the lower house. But yes, Cameron, the fourth non-Italian in history to have this honour.
Yes, he is, Tom. The three that came even before him was Pope John Paul II, and then we had King Juan Carlos of Spain, and then we have the current King of Spain, King Felipe, as well. So clearly it is a very rare honour indeed. 2 Spanish monarchs and 1 Pope. So the King, of course, the first British monarch to address both houses of this Parliament. So that's not an honour that his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, was given. And of course, we're only 5 years after Brexit, aren't we? And we know that relationships between the EU and the UK were a little bit, let's say, fractured in the early 2020, 2021. But it appears King Charles' soft diplomacy may have smoothed their relations over a little bit, because we have seen a succession of state visits to our European neighbours. First to Germany, then to France, now to Italy. So I think that shows, you know, the kind of emphasis that the UK government wants to put on making friends with Europe, particularly at a time where the world order appears to be changing with Donald Trump's tariffs on pretty much everybody.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Apparently, Italian politicians do have a reputation for very long and passionate speeches, for being extra verbose. Oh, well, it looks like the introduction may well have finished. We may be looking at King Charles about to address Parliament. Let's hold our horses.
Absolutely, he is upstanding now. Yes. So let's listen in to the Italian Parliament and King Charles's address.
Presidenti del Senato e della Camera dei Deputati, membri del Governo, senatori, deputati, autorità, signore e signori. Sono enormemente onorato di essere stato invitato qui oggi e molto grato al Presidente Mattarella per il suo gentile invito a compiere una visita di Stato in Italia. È molto importante per la regina e per me tornare in Italia per la nostra prima visita dopo l'incoronazione. Il momento è ancora più speciale per entrambi, dato che oggi ricorre anche il nostro 20° anniversario di matrimonio. E peraltro spero di non stare rovinando la lingua di Dante. Così tanto da non essere più invitato in Italia. Above all, it is a signal honor to have been asked to speak to you all this afternoon. The first time that a British sovereign has addressed the entire Italian Parliament, this fundamental democratic institution. Italy is, as I hope you know, a country very dear to my heart and that of the Queen, as it is to so many of our countrymen and women. I have made 18 official visits over the past 40 years to the Bel Paese. It has been one of the pleasures of my life to come to know this irresistible country. And from Turin to Palermo, Verona to Naples, Florence to Trieste, I have learned a little more about this nation and have come to admire it even more. Like any old friend, I have been with you at happier moments and sadder moments in your national life. For instance, I will never forget my visit to Venice with the Queen in 2009, where we saw the magnificently restored La Fenice Opera House, or to Amatrice in 2017 in the aftermath of that tragic earthquake. So I am here today, ladies and gentlemen, with one purpose: to reaffirm the deep friendship between the United Kingdom and Italy, and to pledge to do all in my power to strengthen that friendship even further in the time that is granted to me as King. Our ties go back over 2 millennia to those ancient Roman visitors who arrived on our windswept shores. It was the Romans who gave Britons the idea of putting a king's head on coins, so I'm especially grateful to them. My own coronation in Westminster Abbey took place on the famous Cosmati pavement laid by British and Italian craftsmen in 1268, a shared foundation indeed. And another foundation in which Britain is proud to have played its part is the support our country lent to the unification of Italy. As Garibaldi landed near Marsala in Sicily in May 1860, 2 Royal Navy warships stood watch. Garibaldi was, as you know, hugely admired in Britain. When he visited in 1864 to thank the British people for their support, Garibaldi mania gripped the entire country. Some 500,000 people came to greet him in London. There was even a biscuit named after Garibaldi, the ultimate mark of British esteem. Many of the heroes of Italy's unification, including Cavour and Mazzini, spent time in the United Kingdom. Through the centuries, ever since, Italian merchants docked in Southampton in the 14th century, and moneylenders from northern Italy settled in the appropriately named Lombard Street in London. Our peoples have traded with each other, inspired each other, learnt from each other. From the wonders of the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution, to scientific pioneers such as Guglielmo Marconi, who refined his genius in the UK before transforming the world. Nearly a third of Shakespeare's plays were set here in Italy, just as Italian artists have drawn inspiration from the Bard. And we have benefited hugely from your influence over what we wear, what we drink, and what we eat. I can only hope you will forgive us for occasionally corrupting your wonderful cuisine. We do so, I promise you, with the greatest possible affection. So we are 2 peoples and 2 nations whose stories are deeply intertwined, including, of course, with that of our European continent. We are both, after all, European countries. Yesterday, I laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Inscribed on its marble are words recalling the British forces who fought alongside Italian forces in the First World War. In a few weeks' time, we will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. We will remember the terrible price of war and of the precious gift of peace. At Anzio and Monte Cassino last year, and in Sicily the year before, we have remembered the British and Allied servicemen who gave their lives in the liberation of this country 80 years before. Including more than 45,000 from Commonwealth nations and almost 30,000 from the United Kingdom. My grandfather, King George VI, visited British and Allied troops in July and August 1944, staying at an HQ near Arezzo. Tomorrow, in Ravenna, as King of the United Kingdom and of Canada, I will have the great honor of commemorating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of that province, together with President Mattarella, in which British and Canadian forces played a key role. And as head of the Commonwealth, it will be my signal privilege to recall the indispensable role played by many troops from the Commonwealth as well as other allied nations. And we remember, too, the terrible suffering of the Italian civilian population, as well as the heroism of the resistance, including Paola Del Din, trained by the Special Operations Executive and dropped by parachute to carry out her mission in support of the Allies 80 years ago today. I know that we are all thinking of Paola, now 101, on this day, and salute her courage. Permettetemi anche di esprimere la nostra profonda gratitudine alle molte centinaia di coraggiosi civili italiani che hanno dato rifugio ai soldati britannici e alleati, rischiando così la propria vita. Today, sadly, the echoes of those times, which we fervently hoped had been consigned to history, reverberate across our continent. Our younger generations can now see in the news every day on their smartphones and tablets that peace is never to be taken for granted. Britain and Italy stand today united in defense of the democratic values we share. Our countries have both stood by Ukraine in her hour of need and welcomed many thousands of Ukrainians requiring shelter. Our armed forces stand side by side in NATO. We are grateful beyond measure for the role Italy plays in hosting key NATO bases and taking a leading role in so many overseas operations. In just a few weeks' time, the Royal Navy's Carrier Strike Group, led by the aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales, will exercise alongside Italian forces in the Mediterranean, a powerful symbol of our cooperation. So too is our project to build our next generation fighter aircraft together through the Global Combat air program alongside Japan. It will generate thousands of jobs in our countries and speaks volumes about the trust we place in each other. We work closely together in the G7, as we did during your G7 presidency last year, whose ministerial meetings set a new record for energy and activism. Just as we stand together in defense of our values, so too we stand together in defense of our planet. From the droughts in Sicily to the floods in Somerset, both our countries are already seeing the ever more damaging effects of climate change. The last time I spoke in this Parliament building was to a special meeting devoted to climate change. I can hardly believe it is 16 years ago now. So I hope you will forgive me for saying that the warnings I offered then about the urgency of the climate challenge are depressingly being borne out by events. Extreme storms, normally seen once in a generation, now characterize every year. Countless precious plant and animal species face extinction in our lifetimes. So much is at stake. Italy's own natural heritage is blessed with extraordinary riches. Indeed, Italy remains home to the highest number of animal species in Europe. Perhaps Rome's greatest poet, Virgil, understood profoundly the respect that was due to nature. He was, it might be said, the father of sustainable farming, a cause I've supported my whole life. In his Georgics, he spoke about respecting the natural cycles of the land, the importance of pollination by bees, soil conservation, and even the value of composting and organic matter. For example, this from a well-known Italian translation of Book 1. Perché non ti spiaccia saturare I terreni aridi con grasso letame, così anche mutando a coltura. I campi riposano e frattanto, sebbene inarata, la terra ti darà il suo frutto. So it is deeply encouraging to see both our countries working together to tackle biodiversity loss and to cut emissions. I can only applaud Italian entrepreneurs for their pioneering achievements, from the world's first geothermal power plant to the first nationwide rollout of smart meters. Earlier today, I was delighted to meet with Italian and British business leaders whose collaboration, innovation, and investment in clean growth are so vital to our energy transition. Upon their success, all our futures depend. Ladies and gentlemen, al centro di tutto ciò che ho descritto, che un denominatore comune, un filo conduttore, la nostra risorsa più grande, I nostri cittadini. It is our citizens, and especially our young people, who are adding piece by piece to the intricate mosaic that makes up the relationship between our countries. Much of that is thanks to over 450,000 Italians who make their home in the United Kingdom, across Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England, as well as to the tens of thousands of British citizens who live across Italy and the millions who visit in each direction. We are inordinately proud of the fact that London is the city with the highest number of Italians living overseas. Our business ties are flourishing, from green power to life sciences, from aerospace to services. The UK is the 5th largest investor in Italy, and last year Italy was the UK's 6th largest source of foreign direct investment projects, figures which speak for themselves. Our cultures continue to have a huge impact on each other. Tomorrow I look forward to seeing this in Ravenna, where Byron is remembered fondly alongside Dante, and to seeing the wonderful Byzantine mosaics of that beautiful city. Where 200 years ago we sent poets, today we delight in each other's music, whether it is the wonder of Italian opera at Covent Garden or Ed Sheeran at the Stadio Olimpico. Ladies and gentlemen, Italy will always be at my heart, just as my beloved mother never forgot her wonderful 25th birthday at Tivoli in 1951, or her stop in Capaci many years later in 1992, where she paid tribute just days after his murder to your legendary anti-mafia prosecutor, Giovanni Falcone.
Well, we've been listening to King Charles there address a joint session of the Italian Parliament. An honour for a British monarch, the first British monarch, only the 4th person non-Italian in history to address such a joint session.
Shall we check in with Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, who's been listening, and he is in Rome for us. Cameron, what did King Charles have to say?
Yeah, well, he packed a lot into that speech, didn't he, Emily and Tom? I'll try and give a very quick summary because I know we're pushed for time. But of course, he said that he wanted to reaffirm a deep friendship between Italy and the United Kingdom for the time granted left to me as king. And of course, I think that was pretty powerful because remember, when he ascended the throne, he devoted his whole life to service. And I think that was perhaps a nod to that theme. And of course, mindful that he is continuing cancer treatment. Now, this was the bit which really stood out for me. He says tomorrow he's going to Ravenna to celebrate the 80th anniversary of Ravenna, the province, being liberated by British and Canadian troops, and he is going as King of the United Kingdom and King of Canada. Now that is significant because, of course, President Trump in the United States has suggested that he would like Canada to become the 51st state of the United States of
Cameron,
America.
I'm just going to interrupt you there to head back to the Italian Parliament and listen back into the King.
Different in so many ways. And I'm nearly finished. But we have found, I believe, over the years, that those differences complement each other rather well. That has been true in centuries past, and it is emphatically true today. Let that be the spirit in which our two nations come together to approach the future. Fiduciosi che qualunque siano le sfide e le incertezze che inevitabilmente affrontiamo come nazioni nel nostro continente e oltre, ora e in futuro, possiamo superarle insieme e lo faremo insieme. E quando lo avremo fatto, potremo dire con Dante, e quindi uscimo a rivedere le stelle. Grazie. I don't know. I've tried.
Well, there we go. King Charles, thunderous applause there. King Charles addressed the Italian Parliament for the first time a British monarch has ever done so. But we're going to come back to the studio now and move on because there is another very important story.
Yes, indeed. The government has announced they've dropped plans for grooming gang inquiries, instead saying they'll focus on locally led work on grooming gangs.
Yes, the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillips, had this to say in the Commons yesterday.
We'll set out the process through which local authorities can access the £5 million national fund to support locally led work on grooming gangs. Following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work.
Well, it was quite the scenes yesterday in Parliament. Delighted to be joined now by our reporter, Charlie Peters, alongside the Shadow Safeguarding Minister, the acting Shadow Safeguarding Minister, Katie Lamb. Charlie, we're going to start with you. Just an overview. What has actually changed with regard to what the government's doing?
Well, in January, on the 16th, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said there would be 5 locally led inquiries in the model like we've seen in Telford, which returned its response in 2022. They also said that they would appoint Tom Crowther Casey, a Welsh barrister, to develop a framework for a national approach to these locally led inquiries. They said that they were the best way to get answers and get some truth in areas that have been affected by these appalling gangs. They also said that they would keep an inquiry led by Baroness Casey to look into some of the factors behind this form of child abuse. However, yesterday the announcement was that no longer are they putting a number on the grooming gang inquiries that they'll support. It's now just further inquiries, and a £5 million fund they announced in January is now for a more flexible option for alternatives just to inquiries. And they say they've done this on the back of feedback they've had from local authorities that we presume don't want inquiries. In fact, an inquiry into grooming gangs has never been launched with the great enthusiasm of the local authority it's been required. It's always had to be forced into action.
Well, Katie Lamb, it's fantastic to have you here in the studio to discuss this. You gave a very impassioned speech yesterday in the House of Commons on this very matter. The Labour government has been accused of sort of sneaking this in before the recess, sneaking in this watering down of local inquiries. Now, a lot of people were calling for a national inquiry, including the Conservative Party. Where do you stand now, the day after?
Well, I think it is fundamentally important that we get a national inquiry. Everything that Charlie said is totally right about the limitations of local inquiries. And another one is that they have no power to compel witnesses. So, of course, if you've done something that you don't want any sunlight to be brought to and somebody says, will you come to this inquiry, you're going to say no. So you have to have a legal basis to command people to come and explain themselves and explain what they've done. The other thing that local inquiries can't do is look at national issues or national policy. So why has this happened in so many towns, in 50 towns up and down this country? And as I say, they can't look at national policy, things like deportation. But to your question about why we saw this on the very last day that Parliament was sitting before everybody broke up for Easter, it's difficult to conclude anything other than the government don't want us to look at this.
What do you say when the government says, as they have repeatedly, that there's already been a national inquiry into child sexual exploitation, that the inquiry had produced a number of recommendations, that the government is committed to implementing all of those recommendations, and that they think that, broadly, that's enough?
The very sad reality is that all sorts of people abuse children in this country every day. Children are abused at home, they're abused in institutions, they're abused by family members, they're abused by strangers. But there is unquestionably a specific trend of groups of predominantly white young girls being preyed upon, groomed and sexually tortured by groups of predominantly Pakistani or Pakistani origin Muslim men. That is a particular type of crime, and it has been covered up by officials, by people who work in local councils, and very likely, there seems to be no other explanation that fits with the facts, by police officers. That is a stain on this country, and it deserves to be investigated in its own right.
And it's your contention that that original inquiry didn't cover that enough, didn't touch on it broadly at all.
So it had, I think, 2 weeks of witness statements on specifically this question of grooming and rape gangs, and there's no way that that's anything like enough. The whole question of child sex abuse is, unfortunately, huge. This is a particular type of crime, and it deserves to be looked at.
And why do you think there has been this hesitance among some Labour politicians, including Jess Phillips herself? Do you believe it might have something to do with the demographics of their voter base in certain constituencies?
Well, it's not for me to say why the government doesn't want to look at this more closely, other than just to say that clearly they don't. We know for a fact there was a West Midlands police report in 2010 that said, we know that there are gangs of men that are going to the school gates and preying on young girls, but we're not going to look into this any further because of the ethnicity of the men and the ethnicity of the girls, because most of the men are Muslim and most of the girls are white, and we think that this would inflame community tensions. So we know that that concern has been behind failing to protect our children in the past.
Just want to bring Charlie Peakers into the conversation now, because, Charlie, of course, it was your documentary, your reporting that really flared this up as a national issue at the start of the year.
Yes, Tom, I think, showing that it was a national issue, not just isolated to a few northern towns and cities, was really crucial. And, Kate, I suppose one of the concerns that the Conservatives might have had is that you referred to that 2-week section of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse during the inquiry where they looked at organised networks, of which grooming gangs was just a sub-strand of that. Now, this was described at the time as a shameful betrayal of the survivors and victims. Do you feel there's a sense of regret in the Conservatives that even though that was an independent inquiry, they didn't do more to really pressure ICSA at the time to really ensure they look at this properly? Is it a missed opportunity back then that the Conservatives didn't say more about ICSA not looking into this properly enough? Was it not on your radar as much as it should have been?
I think it's right that independent inquiries are independent, and so it then becomes very difficult to work out what the minister should and shouldn't be able to tell an independent inquiry to look into. I suppose what would have been better would have been to commission a statutory inquiry in its own right. But what's done is done, and the question now is, what are we going to do in the future? How are we going to make sure that we get justice for the past? How are we going to make sure that these crimes aren't still going on now, which is one of the things that keeps me up at night? And how are we going to stop this from happening again?
And Katie Lamb, how are the Conservatives going to do this then? Because it is recess. Jess Phillips did announce this an hour or so before everyone left for the weekend, well, for 2 weeks break. How are you going to keep this on the agenda then when it comes to the government?
So we will keep making these points, keep shedding light on this issue. My sense is that the government would like this just to go away, and we are definitely not just going to go away. We'll do that by speaking in Parliament, of course, as you say, not for the next 2 weeks during recess. We are laying amendments to the police and crime bill, specifically about grooming and rape gangs. We will be voting again in Parliament at every opportunity that we can for a statutory national inquiry.
Now, Katie, your speech yesterday rightly went viral. You did not hold back. You did not sanitise with your words and frankly the very vivid and pretty horrifying descriptions of what was done to these little girls. What made you make that decision? Because very often in Parliament, people sanitise their language. You were clear and to the point. What was behind that sort of suggestion? Do you think it had the desired effect?
Everything that I read about what has happened to these girls makes me more and more angry and more horrified. And so I thought it cannot be possible that people know about this and they're just leaving it. And I think in the end, the only way to shed the right light on something is to tell the truth. And the more that we, even though it's really hard, it was very difficult to say, I appreciate it's very difficult to listen to, but in the end, the only resort that we have is to tell the truth. And if we're not willing to do that, then we will continue to fail these children.
Katie, 2 years ago, the last Conservative government launched the Grooming Gangs Task Force. One of the bits of good news we got yesterday, that's now made over 1,000 arrests, and it was launched on the back of our investigation into this national scandal. Now, I remember 2 years ago, I could not find Conservatives to come out and back the then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, when she made that point, speaking to me in Rochdale Police Station, that this was a problem of predominantly Pakistani heritage men targeting predominantly right children, not just girls, boys as well. She made that point. She was very brave to make that point, I think, at the time, when the whole political climate was against her. No Conservatives backed her up. Your former boss, Rishi Sunak, bottled it, frankly. He refused to support her when she said it. Now, every Conservative I speak to is very happy to say this, possibly now they're not in government. Do you think your party's come on a bit of a journey in the last 2 years on their issue? Are you braver now politically than you were 2 years ago, and do you regret that period of relative cowardice?
It's not really for me to say about the journey that other people have been on. I would very happily have said this to you 2 years ago, as happily as I would say it to you yesterday. I think perhaps some people didn't appreciate the true scale of the horrors that we are talking about. And as I said earlier, we know that there has been, as part of this cover-up, a huge amount of fear of being labelled racist, of being labelled as hating a particular group or groups of people. And I think that does intimidate people. Whether or not that was behind the decisions that people made 2 years ago, I can't really say.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Katie Lamb, for coming into the studio, Shadow Home Office Minister, and Charlie Peters, our national reporter, of course, too.
Now, we should say that the Labour Party has released a statement saying shameless Robert Jenrick did nothing about heinous grooming gangs while he had power as the minister to help victims of this appalling abuse. The Tories did not hold a single meeting with victims, police forces, external organisations, experts or councils, nor did they lift a finger to implement any of the recommendations of the 7-year-long national inquiry into child sexual abuse. Instead, Jenrick and his colleagues swept it under the carpet after it was published. This is another utterly disgraceful, dishonest and hypocritical attempt to make a political capital out of an issue that he could not have cared less about when he was actually in government.
OK, and as Philip says, it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children from the horrors of child sexual abuse and exploitation. Today, we have set out the next steps in our work to address the issues raised in Alexis Jay's independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. This will put victims at the heart of the government's work to combat child sexual abuse by creating a child protection authority, providing national leadership and learning on child protection and safeguarding.
But we're going to take a breath now, and we're going to move on to something a little lighter. Yes, Universal Studios is set to open their first theme park in Britain, and it'll be in Bedford.
It will indeed. The theme park is set to be one of the largest and most advanced in Europe, near the world, and will bring nearly 20,000 jobs during the construction period, with a further 8,000 new jobs across the hospitality and creative industries when it opens in 2031.
Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is very pleased.
Universal could have chosen anywhere in Europe to make this investment. The fact that they've chosen Britain, the fact that they've chosen Bedfordshire, is a real sign of confidence in the local economy and in the national economy. And I'm delighted that we're able to make this announcement today.
Well, joining us now is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Mid-Bedfordshire, Blake Stevenson. Blake, thanks so much for joining us. What are your thoughts, then, on this huge amount of investment coming to your part of the world?
Thanks for having me. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Bedford, for our county and for our country. It's wonderful to have such a large investment and for it to be on our doorstep. It really puts Bedford, for those who don't know where Bedford is, it really puts it on the map. And I'm really hoping that from this we create a real tourism destination where people come to our area and spend money in the local community.
Is this a win for the Labour government? We've been talking about investment into this country. There are concerns, of course, about the economy in all sorts of different ways. Is this the Labour Party bringing in much-needed investment into our economy?
The country, I think, is in very real need of some good economic news, because the past 9 months have been absolutely dire, and that's down to Labour's political choices and the Chancellor's political choices. So it's absolutely no surprise to me that both Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves jumped on the train to come up to Bedford to make this announcement, because clearly it is a very good news story for the country and certainly for my area. They present it as a win. It's a win for us all, really, but it's good to remind people that actually this deal began with negotiations with the previous Conservative government. They've just managed to sign it now.
Now, of course, this is all part of the government's sort of Oxford-Cambridge ARC strategy, the idea that between Oxford and Cambridge, including Bedford and Milton Keynes, this is a whole prosperity area that will be the centre of a lot of growth. But there are a lot of people who live in Bedfordshire and other parts of sort of the ARC that are concerned about the infrastructure that will come along with this, the potential that there'll be a lot of new housing, a lot of new roads, of course, that new railway line, a new railway station as well. People might be a little bit upset about all the disruption and development.
Central Bedfordshire and Bedford Borough has experienced quite a lot of growth anyway in the past 10 years, much higher than national and regional averages. So we're used to growth. There have been problems locally, and I think this will probably resonate across the country, where housing developments have been built, but infrastructure hasn't followed, or more importantly, hasn't been there at the time that people move into homes. So we need to get that right this time. So you're absolutely right. People are a little cynical because they really want to know, and they really want certainty that the infrastructure that's being promised by the government is actually going to be delivered on time in order to form a strong foundation for supporting this enterprise in the years ahead.
Absolutely. Well, Blake Stevenson, thank you very much indeed. You're the Conservative MP for Mid Bedfordshire, which was delighting in this news. Yeah. Oh, Blake, sorry, one quick question while we've got you. I've just been told we've got a little bit more time, which is fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Blake, I understand that you are a finance man. Could you give us some tips on the old tariffs, what we should be doing with our stocks, etc.?
I'm not going to go tips on stocks, and I wouldn't call myself a finance man, though I did work in the city for 15 years, but more in the regulatory compliance side. But look, Trump's tariffs, they're good for nobody. They'll make everybody poorer. As I said in Parliament last week, we should all be disappointed. And in fact, I was disappointed that Reform colleagues weren't in the chamber to also say they were disappointed. China is making its move in retaliation. We know the EU will do the same. I'm not certain what this government is going to do, other than I think they said they're going to consult with business and have cool heads. Fine, but we really need to know what our government is going to do in response to Trump's tariffs.
Just looking at moves in the markets today, there'll be a lot of people very concerned about the scale of their pensions, about any investments they might have, any ISAs they might have. All have taken plunges. What should people do in and of themselves if they're worried about their safety and their retirement?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I've seen it in my pension, and you will all seen it in yours, because we generally have diversified portfolios and we're invested around the world. So, as markets fall, our pension pots will fall, and it will become an issue for people if they are retiring today. Say, they will be less well off than they would have been if they were retiring 2 weeks ago. So, if people are worried, I would encourage them to seek financial advice. But really, there's no need to panic in the markets.
OK, well, Blake Stevenson, thank you. We will now say goodbye to you, let you get on your way. Conservative MP for Mid Bedfordshire. There we go.
Yeah, no, good sporting of him to talk about those financial curveball questions at the end there. But the news for Bedfordshire, I think, is really, really exciting, and it does show that actually there's stuff that's coming to this country that could have chosen any other city or any other place in Europe to have that European headquarters for Universal Studios Entertainment, and they've picked Bedfordshire.
Yeah. Good news all round, I'd say. So there we go. Well, thank you very much for watching Good Afternoon Britain. I do believe it is Martin Daubney up next, who's going to have a very jam-packed show for you. Well, what have we learnt today? We've learnt a lot.
We've learnt that the King does like speaking Italian.
We've learnt the King likes talking about climate change.
Yeah, certainly that. But do stay with us here on GB News, because there is so much more to cover, so much more to do. And the man to steer you through the rest of the afternoon is the one and only, the inimitable, the man in the know. Yes, it's Martin Daubney coming up with the Martin Daubney Show. That after your very latest weather forecast. Do stay with us here on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For a chance to win a motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS text to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Gynecological health, women's health as a whole, is one of the biggest societal challenges that we face currently.
What would you say, Josephine?
I've been massively failed over the 12 years that I've been dealing with endometriosis in many, many different ways. I wasn't believed to begin with. I was passed from pillar to post. There was a time where after an endometriosis surgery, I got sepsis. I wasn't believed and I was sent away from the hospital and the next day was taken back in quite a serious state. I think because I was young, but also because endometriosis just isn't taken seriously at all.
Is it because women go to the doctor and they say, I'm having really bad pains, and then what does the doctor say sometimes? Do they say, oh, well, everyone gets bad period pains, just have a bit of Nurofen? Is that what sometimes happens, Valentina?
Period and pelvic pain is a silent public health pandemic. It affects 9 out of 10 women. And research from the British Medical Journal tells us that we lose 9 to 12 productive days each year to period pain. But we can't really blame medical professionals. We can't blame GPs. We can't blame the NHS because there isn't research that they can rely on. We have massively underfunded gynecological health as a whole. Currently, we spend only about 2.4% of our entire public health budget for the entirety of women's health. So that 2.4% is measly, and it has to stretch to cover breast cancer, maternity care, menopause, endometriosis. And because women were not allowed to take part in clinical trials up until 1993, we don't really know how most modern medications affect the female physiology